Chapter 165. After Wei Hanshan left, Jiang Taoran shook his head at Chu Xiu with a bitter smile. "Brother Chu, it seems like you've caused quite a bit of trouble this time. Generally speaking, disputes between inspectors would not be reported to Lord Wei, but this time, it seems like you've angered Wei Hanshan to the point that he actually reported this matter to Lord Wei." What Chu Xiu did not affect him at all. Every inspector had their own ways of making money. Jiang Taoran was a slicker, and the way he did things was more secretive. On the surface, he naturally received bribes from the martial arts forces under him, but in reality, he was secretly supporting a small aristocratic family that specialized in smuggling. All the money they obtained belonged to him, so what the other sects and aristocratic families thought had little to do with him. He only appeared here to fish in troubled waters. If Wei Hanshan could get rid of Chu Xiu, he would also be interested in the Jian province prefecture. On the other hand, if Chu Xiu made Wei Hanshan lose face, he would also be in a good mood. This was because his relationship with Wei Hanshan was not considered good. A part of the Shang province prefecture was bordered by his Lin province prefecture, and there were many conflicts between the two sides. Looking at Jiang Taoran, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I will explain to Lord Wei." "So what if Wei Hanshan is dissatisfied? We are both inspectors, can he eat me?" Jiang Taoran's face revealed a trace of an inexplicable smile. "All right then, I will wait to see official Chu's response." After saying this, Jiang Taoran also left. Outside the meeting hall, Du Guangzhong and the others walked out with a worried expression. "Lord, if Wei Hanshan reports this matter to Lord Wei Jiuduan, it will be very troublesome." The reason why a patrol was called a patrol was that this position had the authority to patrol an area. However, they were only an inspector, not a manager. If Chu Xiu did such a big thing behind Wei Jiuduan's back, it was hard to guarantee that Wei Jiuduan would not be angry. Chu Xiu asked, "Do you still remember that I asked you to split half of the loot from destroying the Jiang clan?" Du Guangzhong was stunned and said, "Yes, but shouldn't those be handed over to the Guangzhong torture room?" Chu Xiu's face revealed a hint of confusion. That was prepared to be handed over to Lord Wei. In Guanxi, Lord Wei represents the Guangzhong torture room. Du Guangzhong nodded thoughtfully. They seemed to have guessed something. Wei Hanshan's words were not meant to scare Chu Xiu. He had lost face in front of Chu Xiu. Even with his strength, he was unable to suppress Chu Xiu. Of course, he would report this matter to Wei Jiuduan. Although this kind of behavior felt like a complaint, it was also the most effective. Although it could be said that Chu Xiu had been recommended to the Guangzhong torture room by Chu Yuansheng, if he could not maintain his position as inspector, then he could not blame Wei Jiuduan for not giving Chu Yuansheng any face. 3 days later, the Guanxi torture chamber sent someone to summon Chu Xiu to discuss matters at the branch. In reality, it was to ask him about the Jiang clan's extermination. When Chu Xiu arrived at the Guanxi torture chamber's meeting hall, other than Wei Jiuduan, the other 5 inspectors were also present. Other than Wei Hanshan, who was looking at Chu Xiu maliciously, the others were also sizing up Chu Xiu with a strange gaze. Exterminating a large clan right after taking office was something that even they, who had been patrol envoys for over a decade, did not dare to do. Wasn't Chu Xiu's actions a little too audacious? Wei Jiuduan sat on the main seat. Although he was old, his gaze was as sharp as an eagle's. Even he had not expected that Chu Xiu, who had been recommended to the Guangzhong torture room by Chu Yuansheng, would be so daring. He had exterminated a powerful clan right after taking over the position of inspector. In reality, the Guangzhong torture room had destroyed many clans, especially after Guan Siyu had taken over the Guangzhong torture room. In the past, when Chu Kuanga had taken over the Guangzhong torture room, the Guangzhong torture room had established itself in Guangzhong because of Chu Kuanga's personal charisma. In Guangzhong, whether it was the torture chamber or the clans and sects, they were all obedient to Chu Kuanga. Even if some people had small schemes, they did not dare to show it. When Guan Siyu had taken over the Guanzhong torture room, he had relied on harsh punishments. Anyone who violated the rules of the Guanzhong torture room, even if they were his personal disciples, would not be spared. Therefore, at that time, if there was anyone in Guanzhong who disobeyed the rules of the torture chamber, their clan would be exterminated without any mercy. Of course, that was only 30 years ago, when Guan Siyu had just taken over the Guanzhong torture room. Now that the Guanzhong torture room had stabilized, and the various inspectors and torturers had great power, they had a tacit understanding with the local martial arts factions. This kind of thing had not happened for a while. What truly infuriated Wei Jiuduan that Chu Xiu had done such a thing was that the Jiang family had some connection to him. During his birthday, the Jiang clan had gifted him a precious heart-warming jade Buddha statue. Wei Jiuduan still remembered this. In the end, only a short time had passed, and the Jiang family had been destroyed by his own subordinates. This was a slap to his face. How would the people of Guanxi look at him now? Looking straight at Chu Xiu, Wei Jiuduan said coldly, "Chu Xiu, I need an explanation for this. The Guanzhong torture room is not a place where you can do whatever you want." In an instant, a solemn pressure attacked Chu Xiu, almost making it difficult for him to breathe. In fact, in terms of strength, the old Wei Jiuduan was naturally no match for the Heavenly Sin Branch leader, but in terms of power, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader was far inferior to Wei Jiuduan. The Heavenly Sin Branch leader had been a lone assassin in the Blue Dragon Society headquarters. Later on, he had been in charge of the Heavenly Sin Branch leader, but he had only had 100 or so subordinates, not even as many as Chu Xiu's subordinates. Meanwhile, Wei Jiuduan had been in charge of Guanxi for decades, and he was even more experienced than Hall Master Guan Siyu. There were thousands of constables and bailiffs under him, and they were all elites of the martial arts world. With this kind of power, Wei Jiuduan, who had been in a high position for many years, naturally had an aura that was even stronger than the Heavenly Sin Branch leaders. Under Wei Jiuduan's pressure, Chu Xiu stood up and cupped his hands. "Milord, the Jiang family smuggled contraband and disregarded the laws of the Guanzhong torture room. Their crimes are punishable by death. I have done everything according to the rules." Before Wei Jiuduan could speak, Wei Hanzhan sneered. "Rules? Are your so-called evidence the rules? Chu Xiu, do you take us for idiots?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Let's not talk about whether or not I take you for an idiot. Milord Wei is asking questions here, so what right do you have to speak? Or do you think that your status is high enough to compare to Milord Wei's?" Wei Hanzhan choked on Chu Xiu's words. Feeling Wei Jiuduan's gaze on him, he could only angrily snort and say no more. Chu Xiu cupped his hands at Wei Jiuduan. "Milord, there is a reason for destroying the Jiang family. However, the reason involves a few secrets. I would like to report it to you alone." Hearing this, Wei Hanzhan immediately frowned. Without him in front of him, who knew what kind of sophistry this Chu Xiu would spout? However, Wei Jiuduan was already very dissatisfied with his interruption, so Wei Hanzhan didn't dare say anything else. Looking deeply at Chu Xiu, Wei Jiuduan said indifferently, "Come in with me." Coming to a study, Wei Jiuduan said coldly, "Speak, but let me remind you, think carefully before you speak. Don't think that I am senile. The Guanzhong lands are not in my grasp. I know exactly what you did in the Jiang family." Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Milord, I do not have evidence to destroy the Jiang family. I also know some of the secret rules of the Guanzhong torture room. In destroying the Jiang family this time, I have already plundered all the wealth and resources of the Jiang family. I will offer half of it to Milord." Wei Jiuduan froze at these words. He had guessed that Chu Xiu would have a glib tongue to defend himself, but he had not guessed that Chu Xiu would say something like this. Wei Jiuduan narrowed his eyes and said, "Are you bribing me? I did not think that the person that great hero Chu recommended into the Guanzhong torture room would be this kind of person." Chu Xiu said in a low voice, although I was recommended into the Guanzhong torture room by great hero Chu, I am not the kind of person who cannot recognize reality. The previous patrol inspector Fang Zhengyuan is a good example. I can be upright and outspoken, I can also be impartial, but the prerequisite is that I have sufficient strength. My strength is insufficient, so this method does not suit me. Wei Jiuduan sized up Chu Xiu. In truth, he was somewhat surprised. He had thought that for Chu Xiu to be recommended into the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuansheng, he would definitely be someone like Fang Zhengyuan. He did not think that Chu Xiu would be able to see it so clearly. However, Wei Jiuduan still said coldly, "If you want to use half of the Jiang family's assets to fool this matter, I'm afraid you are thinking too simply. I might as well be frank with you. The Jiang family is very tactful, and I am very satisfied. But in the end, you destroyed the Jiang family without my permission. Have you ever taken me seriously? If I do not punish you this time, how will the martial arts forces in Guanxi see me? The Guanzhong torture room has rules. The rules are like this in the open, and the rules are like this in the dark." Chu Xiu laughed coldly in his heart. His immediate superior's appetite was really big. Even half of the Jiang family's assets could not satisfy his appetite. However, the current Wei Jiuduan was in line with Chu Xiu's previous conjecture. This old torturer had probably completely abandoned his duty as the torturer of the Guanzhong torture room and only cared about his own interests. However, this was a good thing for Chu Xiu. If Wei Jiuduan was really fair, strict, and outspoken, Chu Xiu would not have dared to do things so ruthlessly. Chu Xiu bowed to Wei Jiuduan and said with a solemn expression, "Sir Wei, rules are rules. This time, I attacked the Jiang family not only because they were disrespectful to me, but also because the Jiang family has been secretly tarnishing your reputation, Sir Wei." The Jiang family gifted Lord Wei a heart-calming and warm jade Buddha, but in the end, the Jiang family secretly used this to intimidate others and committed outrages in Jianzhou Prefecture, all using Lord Wei's name. The Jiang family even said in secret that since the money has been spent, of course they have to maximize your remaining value, Sir Wei. Chapter 166. Wei Jiuduan found the words, surplus value, exceptionally grating on his ears. The main experts of the Guanzhong torture room were the 4 disciplinary officers and the leaders of the Punishment Bureau. The leader of the Punishment Bureau needed to be strong enough, while the disciplinary officers needed to be strong enough. Otherwise, they would not be able to control so many inspectors and martial sects under their command. Wei Jiuduan's position as the disciplinary officer had something to do with his ability, but it was mostly because of his seniority. Wei Jiuduan had been in the Guanzhong torture room for over 100 years. His seniority was even greater than Guan Siyu's. This seniority meant that as long as Wei Jiuduan did not make any major mistakes, his position would be more stable than anyone else's. But at the same time, it also meant that he was about to retire. The Guanzhong torture room was not a place to retire. Some of the martial artists in the aristocratic families were old, but because of their bloodline, even if they could not fight, they would still be called ancestors and be revered by their descendants. The sects were also very respectful to these old martial artists. Usually, they would give them the position of Grand Elder, which was a very respectable position. Only the Guanzhong torture room was different. After the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room retired, they were not allowed to interfere with the power of the Guanzhong torture room. Even their subordinates would cut off all relations with them and be loyal to their new superiors. As the saying went, a new ruler would have a new group of subordinates. This was the rule of the Guanzhong torture room. It allowed the power to always be in the hands of a small number of people. It was not like those large sects and aristocratic families, where there would always be some old people pointing fingers and telling them what to do, affecting the authority of the family head or sect leader. Wei Jiuduan was already very old. He would probably retire in a few years. At that time, it would be the turn of a new disciplinary officer. That was why in the last few years of his position as the disciplinary officer, Wei Zheduan's table manners were so unsightly that he had reached the point of being greedy. He did not care about the laws of the Guanzhong torture room at all. He was thinking about his future after he retired. But although he was prepared to give up his power after he retired, he could not tolerate outsiders discussing these things. Wei Zheduan narrowed his eyes and asked Chu Xiu in a cold voice, "Did the Jiang family really say that?" Chu Xiu said righteously, "Of course that's what I said. If Lord Wei doesn't believe me, you can send someone to investigate." Recently, the Jiang clan has been borrowing Lord Wei's name to intimidate others and have done all kinds of things that are out of line. The people of the Jiang clan were not idiots. Of course, they would not say such things in public, but in reality, the Jiang clan had always been doing so. After all, the Jiang clan had paid a huge price to establish a connection with Wei Zheduan. Who knew how long Wei Zheduan would be able to hold the position of the disciplinary officer? Of course, they had to make the best use of their resources. They wanted to obtain as many benefits as possible while Wei Zheduan was still the disciplinary officer. As long as Wei Zheduan sent people to inquire, he would be able to easily find out about these matters. At that time, whether or not the Jiang clan had said such things would no longer be important. In any case, the direct descendants of the Jiang clan were all dead. Their previous actions could represent everything. And at this moment, Chu Xiu took another step forward and said in a low voice, "Lord Wei, this subordinate has something else to say, but I don't know if I should say it." Wei Zheduan narrowed his eyes and said, "What is it?" Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "The Jiang clan dares to say such things not only because the people of the Jiang clan have forgotten their principles for the sake of profit, but also because they see that Lord Wei is about to retire and step down as the disciplinary officer. They no longer have any power, so their fear of you has greatly decreased. Lord Wei, after you step down as the disciplinary officer, you will definitely have to cultivate in the Guanxi region. And the few patrols under your command, forgive me for being blunt, only know how to scheme against each other. I'm afraid that after you step down, they will all be gone." When he heard Chu Xiu's words, Wei Zheduan's expression turned a little ugly. This was because Chu Xiu's words were exactly what he was thinking. Wei Zheduan had always been a very greedy person, including his own people. Thus, he controlled the Guanxi region by relying on his qualifications and some trickery. He didn't have a single trusted aide that he was willing to spend a large sum of money to groom. However, although he didn't have any trusted aides that he could rely on, he was still able to manage the people in the Guanxi region in an orderly manner with his strength and experience. But now that he was about to step down as the disciplinary officer, he realized that he didn't even have a single person that he could rely on. He could hear the meaning behind Chu Xiu's words. It was nothing more than a way of expressing his loyalty. However, Wei Zheduan still sized up Chu Xiu and said indifferently, "You mean that you can become my trusted aide? But your backer is Chu Yuansheng. Why bother coming to me, an old man who is about to retire? Moreover, you, Chu Xiu, aren't easy to deal with. Others are scheming against each other, but won't you be the same as them?" Chu Xiu lowered his head and looked at the ground. He said, "After all, great hero Chu isn't from the Guanzhong torture room. He can't interfere with the specific affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. The county magistrate might as well take charge. I only know that my superior is you, Lord Wei. Instead of currying favor with great hero Chu, I might as well pledge my loyalty to you, Lord Wei." Wei Zheduan narrowed his eyes and subconsciously played with the dragon pattern iron ball in his hand. He said indifferently, "But the crux of the problem is, why should I believe in your loyalty?" Chu Xiu lowered his head and said in a low voice, "The other inspectors all have a foundation in the Guanzhong torture room. I'm afraid they are all waiting for Lord Wei to retire so that they can have a chance to take over, or to cozy up to the new disciplinary officer. In the entire Guanxi branch, only I, Chu Xiu, have no foundation at all. I need Lord Wei's support to have a foothold in the Guanxi region. Without Lord Wei, I'm nothing. Even if you've retired, I still need Lord Wei's connections and prestige in the Guanxi region. So, you don't have to worry about whether I'm loyal to you or not. As long as I have any intention of disobeying you, Lord Wei, you can take everything away from me at any time. Wei Jiuduan looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. He had been in the Guanzhong torture room for so many years, and he had seen Wei Jiuduan fawning over him. He had also seen Wei Jiuduan who feared him or expressed loyalty to him. The only person he had never seen before was someone like Chu Xiu. To show his loyalty, Chu Xiu would directly hand over his own weaknesses to him. However, this feeling was very good. Just as Chu Xiu had said, he had no foundation in the Guanxi region. Just like today's matter, Wei Jiuduan could deal with him or not. It all depended on his mood and attitude. Now that the other inspectors were fully fledged and had their own foundations, they were no longer someone an old man like him who was about to retire could casually deal with. So, as long as he accepted Chu Xiu's loyalty, it was equivalent to him gaining an inspector who was completely under his control. Wei Jiuduan put his dragon pattern iron ball on the table and said in a deep voice, "It's very simple for you to pledge loyalty to me, and it's also very simple for me to accept your loyalty. However, the crux of the problem is, what can I get from you, and what can you get from me?" Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "What I want is only to obtain Milord's trust. Just like this time, as long as Milord can help me deal with the matters within the rules, then I will definitely bring Milord even more benefits. Half of the Jiang family's assets is just the beginning." Wei Jiuduan looked deeply at Chu Xiu and was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "I hope my choice is not wrong, and you'd better not disappoint me. Please rest assured, Lord. I will definitely not disappoint you." Chu Xiu lowered his head, a faint smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. He knew that Wei Jiuduan would definitely agree in the end, because compared to what he needed Wei Jiuduan needed him more. For a torture master who was about to retire and lose some power, Wei Jiuduan had already given up on all the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. As long as it could bring him benefits, he would greedily swallow it up. Now that Chu Xiu could bring him benefits, he could not and would not refuse. At this time, outside the meeting hall, Wei Hanshan was already a little anxious. Only the heavens knew what Chu Xiu had said to Wei Jiuduan and why the two of them had not come out after so long. At this time, Wei Jiuduan and Chu Xiu walked back into the meeting hall. Chu Xiu's face was expressionless, but Wei Hanshan was already a little anxious. The calmer Chu Xiu was, the more it showed that this matter would not develop in the direction he expected. As expected, Wei Jiuduan directly said to the crowd, "Chu Xiu, I have already asked about this matter. The Jiang family secretly smuggled contraband and violated the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. Furthermore, they used my name to commit crimes outside. They should be killed." Chu Xiu, a newly appointed patrol inspector, was able to dig out this cancer of the Jiang family. Not only should he not be punished for this matter, he should be rewarded instead. When they heard this, everyone's expression suddenly changed. What did Chu Xiu say to Wei Jiuduan to actually make Wei Jiuduan stand on his side so clearly? Wei Hanshan even stood up and said with an expression of dissatisfaction, "Lord, this Chu Xiu does not follow the rules when he does things. He has already brazenly done it. Is this still not a problem?" Wei Jiuduan's expression immediately darkened. He looked coldly at Wei Hanshan and said, "Are you teaching me how to do things? Do you need me to go talk to Master Guan and give up my position as torture officer to you right now?" When he heard this, Wei Hanshan could only sullenly sit back down and said in a muffled voice, "This subordinate does not dare." Wei Hanshan's connections in the Guanxi region could be said to be deep-rooted. Other than the Guanzhong torture room, he even had connections in the Guanzhong martial world. However, no matter how strong his connections were, Wei Jiuduan was still the Guanxi torture officer. He was someone who held great power. If he said something was right, even if it was wrong, it was still right. At least before Wei Jiuduan officially retired and relinquished his power, Wei Hanshan did not dare to directly confront Wei Jiuduan. Chapter 167. The 5 inspectors present didn't know what Chu Xiu had said to Wei Jiuduan, but they knew that since Wei Jiuduan had made a decision, Chu Xiu didn't do anything wrong, then he didn't do anything wrong. Whoever dared to object would be slapping Wei Jiuduan in the face. Other than Wei Hanshan, the others didn't have any direct conflicts with Chu Xiu. Of course, they wouldn't provoke Wei Jiuduan at this time. Looking at everyone present, Wei Jiuduan said indifferently, "Since it's like this, then disperse. Remember to manage your own territory. Don't worry about other people's matters." Actually, Wei Jiuduan had a good impression of Wei Hanshan. Although this subordinate of his had always been a little scheming, he knew how to be filial to him and did things very well on the surface. But in the end, he was a little muddle-headed today and actually dared to refute his orders in front of everyone. This needed to be taught a lesson. Chu Xiu revealed a trace of a smile, stood up, and cupped his hands. "Yes, sir." After saying that, Chu Xiu was the first to leave the meeting hall. The others also left one after another. Only Wei Hanshan left with a gloomy expression. After everyone left, a young man in his 30s walked into the meeting hall and bowed respectfully to Wei Jiuduan. "Foster father." Wei Jiuduan looked at the young man in front of him and nodded. "Yang Ling, how is the matter with the sects in Last Sun Prefecture?" Yang Ling said, "It has been handled properly. Those sects think that foster father is about to retire, so they have some ideas that they shouldn't have. This child has already brought people to teach them a lesson." Wei Jiuduan nodded and said, "That's right. Some people just need to be taught a lesson." Yang Ling paused and asked, "Foster father, I saw everything clearly just now. It was clearly Chu Xiu who broke the rules. Why are you still covering for him?" Wei Jiuduan glanced at him and revealed a faint smile. "Why? Are you afraid that Chu Xiu will affect your position?" "I don't dare." Yang Ling quickly cupped his hands. Wei Jiuduan said indifferently, "You don't need to think too much. From now on, Chu Xiu is my man. However, he won't affect your position. After all, Chu Xiu is just an outsider, but you are my adopted son who I have raised for more than 10 years. Due to the rules of the Guanzhong torture room, I can't help you get to a higher position for the time being. Even Master Guan's disciple, Yuqi, can only be an ordinary secret agent in the criminal division. Even if I wanted you to be an inspector, the rules wouldn't allow it. After I retire, I will support you to the position of patrol and let this Chu Xiu assist you. At that time, even if the new penal officer takes office, there will still be a place for you in Guanxi." Yang Ling immediately showed a grateful look and said, "Thank you, foster father." However, although Yang Ling expressed his gratitude, he was sneering in his heart. He had been at Wei Jiuduan's beck and call for more than 10 years. How could he not know what his foster father was like? He said he was worried about the rules of the Guanzhong torture room, but in reality, he didn't want him to be in power. Yuqi was indeed an ordinary secret agent in the criminal division, but he acted on Guan Siyu's warrant. His position in the criminal division was second only to the leaders. Yang Ling could only listen to Wei Jiuduan's orders. When Wei Jiuduan needed him, he could borrow Wei Jiuduan's power and strength. It was equivalent to being an errand boy for Wei Jiuduan. In the end, he had been running for more than 10 years. He had long been dissatisfied with this situation. However, other than being dissatisfied, he could only endure. He could only endure until Wei Jiuduan retired. Only then could he truly be in power. At this time, in Wei Hanshan's mansion in the Shangzhou prefecture, Wei Hanshan, who had returned to his mansion, was so angry that he smashed several cups. "Old fool, you're about to retire and leave, yet you're still playing this game with me." When he thought of Wei Jiuduan's attitude, Wei Hanshan was so angry that the roots of his teeth itched. Among the patrol envoys in the Guanxi area, Wei Hanshan wasn't the strongest, but he was the best at making money among those of the same rank. Not only did he manage the Shangzhou and Qinzhou prefectures in good order, but he also gave Wei Zheduan a lot of filial piety. He also used his status in the Jianghu to help Wei Zheduan a lot. However, today, he sided with Chu Xiu in front of everyone and even gave him a warning. This made Wei Hanshan feel unusually angry. However, he had also been Wei Zheduan's subordinate for more than 10 years, so he knew what kind of person his superior was. Wei Zheduan was naturally suspicious, unkind, and greedy. He treated his foster son like this, let alone others. This time, Wei Zheduan was standing on Chu Xiu's side because Chu Xiu had taken out enough money to move Wei Zheduan. Wei Zheduan was also probably wary of Wei Zheduan's influence, so he gave him a warning. However, the crux of the problem was that Wei Zheduan was about to retire and give up his position, yet he still firmly held on to his power and didn't give his subordinates the slightest chance. This was a little too much. Most importantly, this matter was a big blow to Wei Hanshan. He was prepared to deal with Chu Xiu, but in the end, not only did Chu Xiu not receive any punishment, but he even received a reward. Wei Hanshan, on the other hand, was disgraced. Not only would this matter affect his position in the hearts of his subordinates, but it would also affect the prestige of the forces under his jurisdiction. Not only did the Jiang clan not receive many benefits, but they also caused trouble for themselves. If he had known earlier, Wei Hanshan wouldn't have gotten involved in this mess. Of course, it was too late for Wei Hanshan to regret now. At this time, one of his trusted subordinates pushed open the door and entered. When he saw this scene, he immediately shrunk his neck and swallowed back the words he wanted to say. Wei Hanshan looked at his hesitant appearance and couldn't help but scold him, "If you have something to say, then say it. Don't bother me at this time." The martial artist hurriedly said, "This subordinate actually wanted to say, since Lord Wei doesn't care about this matter, why don't we report this matter to Master Guan? Chu Xiu's status is special. Although he was recommended by great hero Chu, because of this, he has received a lot of attention. Although Master Guan won't easily care about the matters of the patrol inspector, Master Guan will definitely care about Chu Xiu. After all, he has great hero Chu behind him." Wei Hanshan frowned and said, "What do you know? Go, go, go. Don't cause trouble here." After throwing that bailiff out, Wei Hanshan's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. He was actually a little tempted. As the hallmaster of the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Siyu was concerned about the matters of the entire Guanzhong torture room. The people he directly interacted with were the disciplinary officers and the leaders of the punishment bureau. He naturally wouldn't ask about the small matters of the patrol inspectors. However, Chu Xiu was personally recommended by Chu Yuansheng. Perhaps Guan Siyu would ask about it. However, the only thing Wei Hanshan was worried about was Wei Zheduan's attitude. After all, he was going to report Chu Xiu over Wei Zheduan. This was equivalent to slapping Wei Zheduan in the face and criticizing Wei Zheduan for not doing his job. If Chu Xiu was punished in the end, then Wei Zheduan would also be reprimanded. But when he thought of Wei Zheduan's attitude today, Wei Hanshan sneered in his heart. "Since you're heartless, then don't blame me for being unjust." However, Wei Zheduan had stayed in the Guanxi area for close to a century. He had accumulated too much prestige for too long. Wei Hanshan didn't dare to brazenly report Wei Zheduan. Hence, Wei Hanshan planned to report this matter anonymously to the disciplinary hall's headquarters. He would first remove himself from the picture. Thinking up to this point, Wei Hanshan personally ordered a few of his trusted subordinates to secretly pass the message to the discipline hall headquarters. Several days later, inside the disciplinary hall's headquarters, Guan Siyu looked at the news that came from below. His eyes revealed a hint of surprise. Someone actually sent a report letter to him. This was really rare. This was something that had not happened for many years. Although the Guanzhong area wasn't small, it had a strict structure. Each level governed the next. It was very rare for this kind of situation of skipping a level to report happened. In the end, someone actually leaked the news to him. Clearly, there was a problem with the disciplinary hall's subordinates. They actually couldn't control their subordinates. Originally, this kind of matter that involved a low-level patrol inspector wouldn't be sent to Guan Siyu. If he had to manage everything, then wouldn't Guan Siyu be extremely busy? There were many people in the disciplinary hall's headquarters who were responsible for helping Guan Siyu deal with information and official documents. After analyzing and filtering, they would report the information that really required Guan Siyu's decision to Guan Siyu. This time, when Chu Xiu's matter was sent to Guan Siyu, it was really as Wei Hanshan thought. Because Chu Xiu had been recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuansheng, his status was special, so he was sent to Guan Siyu. After reading the news, Guan Siyu called out softly, "Yuqi, come in." Hearing this, Yuqi pushed open the door and entered. He said respectfully, "Master, what's the matter?" Guan Siyu handed the news to Yuqi and said, "What do you think of this news?" After Yuqi read the news, a strange look appeared in his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't expected that Chu Xiu would cause such a huge commotion the moment he took office. Furthermore, his actions were decisive and ruthless. He didn't seem like a martialist that Chu Yuansheng had recommended to the Guanzhong torture room. It looked like he had been wrong. Although Chu Xiu had been recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuansheng, he was definitely not the same kind of person as Chu Yuansheng. Yuqi put the news aside and raised his head to say to Guan Siyu, "Master, I'm afraid Wei Jiuduan is getting old. He can't even control his subordinates. I'm afraid we have to change the disciplinary hall's candidate." Guan Siyu asked for his opinion, but Yuqi didn't mention Chu Xiu at all. Instead, he directly talked about Wei Jiuduan. This made Guan Siyu reveal a satisfied expression. Chapter 168. Yuqi was the disciple that Guan Siyu had raised since he was young. If Guan Siyu had a son, Yuqi's status might be even higher than Guan Siyu's biological son. However, due to the rules of the Guanzhong torture room and Guan Siyu's incorruptibility, he could let the person recommended by Chu Yuansheng enter the Guanzhong torture room to be a patrol inspector. However, he would not let his disciple hold an important position while he was still a hall master. Even so, he would still train Yuqi to see the big picture, such as now. What Chu Xiu had done was considered a major matter in the Jianghu prefecture, but in Guanxi, it could be suppressed by Wei Jiuduan with a single sentence. In the entire Guanzhong, it was just a small matter. If it weren't for Chu Xiu's status, this news would not have reached Guan Siyu's desk. Therefore, when Guan Siyu asked Yuqi for his opinion on this matter, Guan Siyu would be disappointed if Yuqi's answer was only about whether Chu Xiu was right or wrong. However, Yuqi could see from this news that Wei Jiuduan could no longer completely control the Guanxi area. Only such an answer could be considered acceptable. Guan Siyu nodded and said, "Wei Jiuduan is indeed a little old. When I first joined the Guanzhong torture room, he was already the torture officer. Later, he stayed in that position for decades. Unfortunately, the older one gets, the more they think. It is indeed time for him to retire." Yuqi said, "Actually, Wei Jiuduan should have retired a long time ago. However, Master, you saw that he had a senior position in the Guanzhong torture room, so you allowed him to continue in his current position. Otherwise, any leader from the criminal division could have been qualified for the position of torture officer." Guan Siyu shook her head and said, "That's where you're wrong. Any one of the leaders of the judicial division is indeed stronger than Wei Jiuduan, but the position of disciplinary officer isn't something that can be achieved just by having strength. The disciplinary officer had to balance the various factions under his command and stabilize the order of the martial arts world. He had to have enough prestige and experience. Although the leaders of the criminal investigation department were quite strong, they were not as good as Wei Jiuduan in other aspects. Furthermore, the tasks of the Criminal Investigation Department were also very important, so he still had to hold the position of Criminal Investigation Officer for a period of time. Let me think about who can take over this position. However, Wei Jiuduan had indeed slacked off during this period of time. He couldn't even control his own subordinates. Send this information to Wei Jiuduan. There's no need to tell him how it came about. Let him investigate it himself. If he doesn't even know who skipped a rank to report it, then he really doesn't need to be the Guanxi penal officer anymore. Yuqi nodded and said, "What about Chu Xiu?" Guan Siyu said indifferently, "I wasn't wrong. This Chu Xiu isn't someone who knows his place. Although he did save Chu Yuansheng, he definitely had the intention of demanding repayment. However, with his relationship with Chu Yuansheng here, I can't punish him directly. Go to Chu Xiu first and ask him one thing. Tell him that I want an explanation. If his explanation is reasonable and satisfies me, then this matter will be over. If he can't give me a reasonable explanation, then his position as a patrol inspector will be over. Just throw him into the criminal division as a low-level secret agent." "Yes, master." Yuqi nodded and immediately turned to leave. The atmosphere in the patrol hall of the Jian province prefecture was pretty good. The depressed looks of the constables and bailiffs had disappeared. In their eyes, this new lord's methods and strength were undoubtedly very brilliant. He had become famous after the battle of exterminating the Jiang family and re-established the prestige of the Jian province prefecture patrol hall. In the past, the martial arts factions that didn't take them seriously had taken the initiative to present gifts to them and befriend them. Furthermore, they could accept them openly and with a clear conscience. One had to know that when Fang Zhengyuan was the patrol inspector, he was very strict with them. Accepting bribes was definitely not allowed to happen. Furthermore, in the Guanxi branch, Wei Jiuduan had stripped Wei Hanzhan of his dignity and sided with Chu Xiu. This allowed the matter of exterminating the Jiang family to be completely forgotten. This had also completely established Chu Xiu's position. Previously, when Chu Xiu had just taken over the position of patrol, he was just an outsider. His position hadn't been completely stabilized yet. Now, regardless of whether it was internally or externally, after these few incidents, his position as patrol inspector could be said to be impregnable. He had completely stabilized his position. In the study, Chu Xiu flipped through the news that Du Guangzhong and the others had brought. In fact, there weren't many major incidents. Most of them were minor matters. After all, the Jianzhou prefecture was only so big. There were a dozen or so small cities around it. What major incidents could there be under normal circumstances? Furthermore, Chu Xiu didn't monopolize power. Du Guangzhong and the other two still had a lot of autonomy. They would handle some of the unimportant matters and give Chu Xiu a result in the end. Therefore, Chu Xiu was very relaxed as a patrol inspector. He had obtained quite a lot of cultivation resources from the Jiang family. After giving Wei Jiuduan and distributing them to his subordinates, there was still quite a lot left. It was enough for him to cultivate for a while. At this moment, Du Guangzhong suddenly knocked on the door and entered. With a nervous expression, he said, "Sir, Lord Yuqi from the headquarters is here. He says he wants to see you." One couldn't blame Du Guangzhong for being nervous. Yuqi's identity wasn't a secret in the Guangzhong torture room. He was Lord Guan Siyu's personal disciple. Even if his identity was just an ordinary secret agent in the criminal division, his status was actually very high. Even Wei Jiuduan had to be very polite to him. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Yuqi is here? Please come to the guest hall." Chu Xiu really didn't expect Yuqi to come at this time. As Guan Siyu's disciple, Yuqi often helped Guan Siyu handle various miscellaneous matters. It could be said that he was very busy. Why did he specially come to see Chu Xiu? Chu Xiu didn't have time to think too much. He directly stepped into the guest hall and put on a smile. Brother Yuchi is here. I didn't go out to greet you. I hope you don't take offense. Yuchi took a sip of tea and said with a smile, I am not some important person, so there is no need to greet me. Actually, I am here this time to ask you something on behalf of Master. Oh? What is it? Chu Xiu's expression didn't change as he asked. Yuchi took out the report letter and handed it to Chu Xiu. Take a look at the contents. Master said that he wants an explanation, a reasonable explanation. Chu Xiu took the report letter and looked at the contents. He immediately frowned. Someone had actually reported this matter to Guan Siyu. This was indeed something he hadn't expected. Someone who did this was simply slapping Wei Jiuduan in the face. Moreover, it was anonymous. The amount of information contained within was very large. Chu Xiu hadn't miscalculated Wei Jiuduan's attitude, but he had overestimated Wei Jiuduan's control over Guanxi. He hadn't retired yet, but the inspectors under him didn't take him seriously. Once he retired, the tea would cool down after he left. Regarding this report letter, the first person that Chu Xiu thought of was Wei Hanzhan. After all, among the inspectors, only he had the most direct conflict with him. Of course, it was also possible that the person who reported this was someone else. You might know a person's face, but you didn't know his heart. Chu Xiu didn't know which people's interests he had interfered with and who didn't like him. Yuchi looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, Brother Chu, Master just wants an explanation. It's very simple. Haven't you thought about it yet? Chu Xiu slowly put down the report letter. Since Guan Siyu had sent her personal disciple, was the explanation really that simple? Perhaps it was, but if he explained it incorrectly, then he might not be able to stabilize his position as inspector for long before he had to move. After returning the report letter to Yuchi, Chu Xiu said in a low voice, the Guanzhong torture room needs dignity. The Guanzhong torture room guards Guanzhong, but it is also the ruler of this place. The torture chamber's laws are judged by the Guanzhong torture room. Whether someone is guilty or not is also decided by the Guanzhong torture room. The Jiang family's matter has been determined, and the evidence is conclusive. They smuggled contraband and flouted the torture chamber's laws. They are guilty and deserve death. Destroying the Jiang family allowed the Jianzhou Prefecture Inspector Hall to regain the dignity that belonged to the Guanzhong torture room. This deal is very worthwhile. A smile appeared on Yuchi's face. That's right, Brother Chu. I will bring your words back to Master. From the first sentence that Chu Xiu said, Yuchi knew that Chu Xiu had passed the test. Even if he had not seen Guan Siyu, he knew the result. Most of the rules of the Guanzhong torture room were set by Guan Siyu. Compared to Chu Kuanga, who used his personal charm to influence the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Siyu used harsh punishments and rules to rule the Guanzhong torture room. Destroying the Jiang family was a small matter, and it was also a small matter whose interests it affected. The important thing was whether this matter would affect the reputation and interests of the Guanzhong torture room. Obviously, Chu Xiu's actions had only strengthened the Guanzhong torture room's prestige in the Jianzhou prefecture, so his explanation was reasonable and could pass the test. Yuchi stood up and smiled. Since that's the case, then there's nothing else. I'll leave now. Chu Xiu said, Why are you in such a hurry, Brother Yuchi? I've already asked someone to prepare food and wine. Yuchi shook his head and said, There's always time to drink, but this time I didn't come to Guanxi just for Brother Chu's place. I also have to pay a visit to the Guanxi Punishment Hall branch to see Lord Wei Jiuduan. Chu Xiu nodded thoughtfully and sent Yuchi away. He seemed to have understood something. He had passed the test, but Wei Jiuduan's reputation would probably be ruined. On the second day after Yuchi left, Wei Hanzhan appeared in the Jianzhou Prefecture's Inspector Hall. He slowly stepped into the Inspector Hall. This time, Wei Hanzhan's attitude was very fearless. Looking at Chu Xiu, Wei Hanzhan sneered. Chu Xiu, I said before that this matter is definitely not over. Now that your outrageous actions have even alarmed the headquarters, how long can you sit in your inspector position? Chapter 169. Wei Hanshan's Shangzhou Prefecture was very close to Jianzhou Prefecture. Moreover, Yuqi did not hide his tracks when he came to Guanxi. Wei Hanshan received the news almost as soon as Yuqi arrived at Jianzhou Prefecture. When he learned that Yuqi had personally come to Jianzhou Prefecture, Wei Hanshan immediately knew that his anonymous report had been successfully delivered to Lord Guan. Otherwise, Yuqi would not have personally come to see Chu Xiu. Squinting at Wei Hanshan, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "You are the one who secretly slandered me behind Lord Wei Jiuduan's back?" Wei Hanshan sneered, "What slander? I don't know anything, so don't accuse others. It's obviously your own misdeeds that caused such a big commotion. That's why the headquarters were alerted." Although he and Chu Xiu were the only two present, Du Guangzhong and the others had retreated because they didn't dare to interfere in the matters between the two Lord Patrol envoys. Wei Hanshan didn't dare to speak carelessly at this time. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "If you don't want others to know, then don't do it." Wei Hanshan, "It's only the two of us now. Is there any meaning in putting on an act here? Besides, what are you here for? Are you preparing to mock me?" Wei Hanshan leisurely sat in front of Chu Xiu and said indifferently, "Of course I'm not that bored. I'm only here to discuss a deal with you." "What deal?" Wei Hanshan said, "Chu Xiu, the trouble you caused this time has already reached the main hall. Not only will you lose your position as inspector, you may even be punished by the torture chamber. Lord Guan has always been impartial. Even if you were recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by hero Chu Yuansheng, it is useless. I heard that you destroyed the Jiang family and obtained many things from them. You should know that if you didn't secretly cause trouble, the Jiang family was prepared to give me these things as a show of filial piety. So, if you're willing to be tactful and hand over all these things to me, I can still help you. Can you help me block the investigation from the higher-ups and keep my position?" Chu Xiu asked expressionlessly. Wei Hanshan sneered, "You're dreaming. Who can stop the people from the main hall? However, my Shangzhou prefecture is adjacent to your Jianzhou prefecture. If the main hall sends someone down to investigate, someone will definitely ask me. The only thing I can do to help you is not to add insult to injury. Otherwise, if I say a few bad things about you, you know the consequences. You might even be severely punished by the main hall." When Chu Xiu heard this, he immediately sneered and said, "Wei Hanshan, you should be the one dreaming. You reported me to Lord Guan, and now you covet the things I obtained from the Jiang clan. In the end, all the benefits are yours?" Wei Hanshan only sneered and did not say anything, but his meaning was very clear. That was, he already had Chu Xiu in his hands. Chu Xiu knocked on the table with his hand and said, "If I'm not wrong, you came here after seeing Yuqi leave. Based on Yuqi's speed, he has already set off for the Guanxi branch. When you return to the Shangzhou prefecture, you should receive news from Lord Wei." "Wei Hanshan, you're not a fool, but you're an arrogant person. The Guanzhong torture hall has its own rules, and the Guanxi region also has its own rules. You should solve your own problems by yourself, but you insist on exposing the matter to the outside world, believing that you're infallible. I don't know if I will be removed from the position of patrol this time, but I do know that you will soon be out of luck." Wei Hanshan's expression changed slightly. He only knew that Yuqi had personally come to the Jianzhou prefecture, but he did not know what Yuqi had said to Chu Xiu. Seeing how calm Chu Xiu was, Wei Hanshan immediately felt that something was wrong. However, Wei Hanshan still said coldly, "Chu Xiu, you can be stubborn to the end. When the people above come down, you will be crying." With that, Wei Hanshan hurriedly left. He wanted to return to the Jianzhou prefecture to have someone scout out the situation. Seeing Wei Hanshan's departing figure, Chu Xiu could not help but reveal a cold glint in his eyes. His foundation in Guanzhong was still shallow, and it could be said that he had just established himself. Therefore, other than his own territory, Chu Xiu really did not plan to incur grudges with others. Unfortunately, even if he did not make things difficult for others, others still insisted on making things difficult for him. Since Wei Hanshan wanted to be his enemy, there would definitely be no lack of open and covert means in the future. After all, in Guanxi, Wei Hanshan's foundation, strength, and territory were all greater than Chu Xiu's. Of course, Wei Hanshan still had a problem to overcome, and that was Wei Zheduan's anger. When Wei Hanshan returned to the Shangzhou prefecture, Yuqi also arrived at the Guanxi Punishment Hall branch. After seeing Wei Zheduan, Yuqi smiled and cupped his hands. Lord Wei, the Guanxi region hasn't been very peaceful recently. Someone has already reported this to Master. However, Master said that the Guanxi region's matters should be resolved by the Guanxi region itself. If Lord Wei can't resolve it, then the disciplinary hall headquarters will intervene. With that, Yuqi handed the secret letter to Wei Zheduan. After reading the contents, Wei Zheduan's expression immediately turned gloomy. Don't worry, I will resolve this matter. I will not trouble Master Guan anymore, and this kind of thing will definitely not happen again in the future. Yuqi smiled. That's good. I will go back and report to Master now. After Yuqi left, Wei Zheduan angrily threw the dragon pattern iron ball in his hand to the ground, immediately blasting out a large pit several meters wide. Get Wei Hanshan over here. Wei Zheduan had no proof that this anonymous letter was written by Wei Hanshan. However, as the Guanxi Punishment Hall's disciplinary officer, did he need proof to deal with this kind of matter? Last time, he had accepted Chu Xiu's bribe, accepted Chu Xiu's loyalty, and stood on his side. In the blink of an eye, someone had reported this matter to the Punishment Hall headquarters. Who would believe that it was not Wei Hanshan who did it? Besides, even if this matter was really not Wei Hanshan's doing, it didn't matter. Wei Zheduan just wanted to find someone to vent his anger on. Even if he found the wrong person, it was enough to give the other inspectors a warning. He wanted them to see the consequences of secretly playing dirty tricks. At this time, Wei Hanshan had just returned to the Shang Prefecture's Inspector Hall. He was about to send someone to inquire about the news when he heard his subordinate report that Wei Zheduan wanted him to go to the Guanxi branch. When he heard this news, Wei Hanshan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He immediately went to the Guanxi branch. At this time, not only Wei Hanshan, but Chu Xiu and the other inspectors also received the news in advance and went to the Guanxi branch. In the Guanxi Torture Hall branch's meeting hall, Chu Xiu and the other inspectors were sitting in the hall. Wei Zheduan sat in the main seat with a gloomy expression. The atmosphere was extremely oppressive. When Wei Hanshan stepped into the meeting hall and felt the atmosphere, he secretly cursed in his heart. The current scene was similar to when Wei Zheduan had interrogated Chu Xiu, except that the person being interrogated was him. Wei Hanshan was about to say something when he heard Wei Zheduan say in a chilly tone, "I had already made up my mind about the Jiang clan's extermination. If you were dissatisfied, you could have told me. But in the end, you went to the main hall to complain behind my back. Do you still have me, the punishment hall, in your eyes? Or is it that the vast Guanxi branch can no longer contain you?" Wei Hanshan hurriedly said, "Sir, you've wronged me. I really didn't do anything." Wei Zheduan sneered, "Who else could it be if not you? Very well, tell me. Tell me and confront me in court." Wei Hanshan was about to say something, but he immediately swallowed his words. What was he supposed to say? None of the inspectors in the Guanxi branch were people to be trifled with. If he were to randomly accuse others, he would be courting death. Can't say it? Wei Zheduan's expression turned cold, and a powerful aura suddenly erupted from his body. A faint golden gang qi condensed in the meeting hall and pressed down on Wei Hanshan with the weight of Mount Tai. The blue stone tiles on the ground cracked under this powerful pressure, and the cracks extended to Wei Hanshan's feet in a straight line. The powerful pressure immediately caused Wei Hanshan's face to turn red, and his body involuntarily fell to his knees with a thud. In fact, Wei Hanshan, a warrior who had condensed the 3 flowers above his head, could withstand the aura of an expert in the oneness of heaven and man realm. Back then, Chu Xiu had used the Dugu seal of the 9 words formula to withstand the divine black spatial claw of the heavenly Sin branch leader. Now, even if Wei Hanshan did not have a defensive secret technique like the Dugu seal, he could still withstand it. However, he did not dare to do so. Wei Jiuduan was currently in a fit of anger. The more he resisted, the more Wei Jiuduan would be enraged. Even Wei Hanshan himself did not understand why Wei Jiuduan was so sure that he was the one who did it without any evidence. Wei Jiuduan was even so angry and sensitive. Wei Jiuduan said coldly, "I know what you are thinking. You think that I am old and about to retire, so you no longer care about me and can do whatever you want. But in the Guanxi branch, as long as Lord Guan's order does not come, I will still be the penal officer of the Guanxi branch." When Wei Jiuduan said this, he not only exerted his powerful aura on Wei Hanshan, but also looked at the other inspectors, including Chu Xiu, who had just chosen to be loyal to him. On the surface, his action seemed to be punishing Wei Hanshan, but he was secretly warning the other patrol envoys. He was telling them that as long as he was still the disciplinary officer, he would have the final say in the Guanxi region. "We dare not." Chu Xiu and the others stood up and bowed in unison. Wei Jiuduan only retracted his aura when he heard this. He said coldly, "You should know whether you dare or not, so I won't say more. Wei Hanshan, seeing that you have been with me for many years, I will not deprive you of your inspector position this time. However, I will punish you a little to prevent you from committing a serious crime. You are in charge of 2 prefectures, so from now on, the Chen province will be managed by Jiang Taoran." As soon as he said this, everyone present immediately looked at Jiang Taoran, who had been silent all this while, with astonished gazes. Chapter 170. To be able to become an inspector in the Guanzhong torture room, as long as they could hold this position for more than 10 years, they were basically not simple characters. Right now, Chu Xiu had this kind of feeling. If he could predict that Wei Hanshan would be unlucky this time, then others would naturally be able to as well. Moreover, Jiang Taoran was a step faster. He must have made some kind of deal with Wei Jiuduan first, which allowed him to snatch the Qinzhou prefecture from Wei Hanshan's hands. When Chu Xiu and Wei Hanshan had a conflict, Jiang Taoran had pretended to be a peacemaker. In fact, he was just looking for an opportunity to profit from the conflict. Now, he had finally found this opportunity. However, Chu Xiu didn't mind it too much, because he had never thought of expanding his forces at all. He had just arrived and became an inspector at the physical invulnerability realm. This was already eye-catching enough. If he had 2 prefectures under his command, then he would become the target of public criticism. Wei Hanshan knelt on the ground and looked gloomily at the smiling and harmless Jiang Taoran. He also looked at Chu Xiu, who was sitting at the side and looking like he was watching the show. Wei Hanshan was so angry that the roots of his teeth itched. Of course, he hated Wei Jiuduan even more in his heart. However, he did not dare to show this hatred. Wei Jiuduan snorted coldly and waved his hand. "All right, you can all leave. Remember, in the future, don't play any tricks." After saying this, Wei Jiuduan turned around and left. Chu Xiu looked at Wei Hanshan, who had just stood up with difficulty. He smiled faintly and said, "Lord Wei, I warned you before that you would soon be out of luck. Now, it seems that it has really come true, right?" Wei Hanshan did not get angry at this moment. He only looked at Chu Xiu with a cold gaze. "Very good. Chu Xiu, I have underestimated you before. You are able to enter the Longhu leaderboard at such a young age and compete with the young elites of the large sections. You are indeed not a simple person, be it in terms of strength or tactics. I was reckless this round, and I lost. But don't forget what I said before. This matter is definitely not over. After he finished speaking, Wei Hanshan coldly glanced at Chu Xiu, then gave Jiang Taoran a deep look before turning around to leave. Chu Xiu also followed him out of the door without a care. The remaining 4 inspectors exchanged glances with each other. Their eyes were filled with confusion. In the future, they wouldn't have to look at Chu Xiu the same way they used to look at him. Although he was young, his methods and strength weren't immature. Even Wei Hanshan was played around with by him. He already had the qualifications to be on equal footing with them. After returning to the Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall, Chu Xiu immediately began to cultivate in seclusion with peace of mind. It wasn't until now that his troubles were truly resolved. He had secured the position of inspector. In the outside world, Wei Hanshan had suffered a great loss, so he probably wouldn't be in the mood to cause trouble for him for the time being. After stepping into the physical invulnerability realm, other than a period of seclusion in the dense forest of Shangmang Mountain, Chu Xiu basically spent the rest of his time scheming against the group of people in the Guanzhong torture room. He didn't have much time to cultivate. There was a small bottleneck between the physical invulnerability realm and the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm. Not only did it require accumulation, but it also required enlightenment. One's essence, qi, and spirit had to be unified to reach the peak and condense the 3 flowers above the head. Only then could one truly be considered to have reached the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm. Although Chu Xiu's combat strength was very strong at the moment, and he could even fight with Wei Hanshan, who had already reached the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm, Chu Xiu actually hadn't reached the threshold of this realm. The reason he was able to fight with Wei Hanshan was entirely because of his strong foundation and amazing explosive power. In terms of realms, if they were to fight to the extreme, Chu Xiu's foundation was actually still inferior to Wei Hanshan's. After all, there was a difference of 1 realm between the two, and it was a small realm like the 3 flowers at one's prominence, which could be considered a bottleneck. As for the Jiang clan's ancestor, who had been killed by Chu Xiu, he was on the brink of death and couldn't be taken out to be a battle achievement. Killing an old man on the brink of death wasn't something worth bragging about. A month later, in the middle of the night, while Chu Xiu was in seclusion in the inspector hall, a subtle movement suddenly came from the hall. This caused Chu Xiu, who was in seclusion, to suddenly open his eyes. He wasn't in seclusion for life and death. He was only accumulating his true qi and comprehending martial arts, so his perception was still there. When he heard that someone had sneaked into the inspector hall, Chu Xiu immediately frowned. It was true that the land of Guanzhong was a mix of good and bad people, but the Guanzhong torture room had absolute strength and prestige. Usually, some villains and thieves would avoid the Guanzhong torture room. At least, Chu Xiu had never heard of anyone daring to directly attack the Guanzhong torture room. Moreover, the strength of the Jianghu Prefecture's inspector hall wasn't weak. There were dozens of constables and constables guarding the place. Qin Fang and Lu Qingli weren't in the hall, but Du Guangzhong was. Now that this person was able to hide from the movements of so many people and sneak near him, it was obvious that he was not weak. Chu Xiu quietly pushed open the door of the seclusion room and quickly formed a seal with both hands. Formation formula, internal binding seal. Scamper the world, let me move freely. In an instant, Chu Xiu's speed exploded to the extreme. In an instant, he appeared in front of a black shadow. The red sleeve saber suddenly slashed out, and the biting cold blood refined divine gang fell with a ferocious crimson color. The speed was extremely fast. However, the black shadow's figure was even more elusive. Its speed was not much slower than Chu Xiu's internal binding seal. As the figure floated, it was like a willow leaf dancing in the wind, easily dodging Chu Xiu's saber. In an instant, more than 10 soul-chasing darts had appeared in front of Chu Xiu, and Chu Xiu didn't even see how the person in front of him released the hidden weapons. The speed of the opponent's hidden weapons was not slower than Chu Xiu's azure dragon in the sleeve. Confrontation Formula, Dugu Seal. In an instant, the earth energy around Chu Xiu condensed together, and he was as immovable as a mountain. When the soul-chasing darts hit Chu Xiu, they were directly blocked by his Dugu Seal. As for the Black Shadow, in a flash, he directly leaped onto the roof and left the inspector hall. Looking at the soul-chasing darts on the ground, Chu Xiu immediately frowned. He felt that the hidden weapons seemed a little familiar. At this moment, the fluctuations from the fight between the two attracted Du Guangzhong and the others. Seeing that someone actually dared to sneak into the inspector hall of the Guangzhong torture room, Du Guangzhong's expression suddenly changed, and he directly said coldly, "Sir, this thief is extremely audacious. I will immediately lead the people to chase after him." Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Don't chase after him for now. I will go on my own. You guys just wait here." With that said, Chu Xiu's figure moved, and he directly leaped onto the roof and disappeared. Following the traces of the Black Shadow, Chu Xiu directly came to a small alley not far from the inspector hall. The Black Shadow twisted a little, and took off his hood. He was actually wearing an extremely dark suit, and only his eyes were exposed. His figure simply seemed to have blended into the night. "Brother Chu, long time no see. Perhaps I should call you Inspector Official Chu now." The Black Shadow's face carried a trace of a faint lazy smile. It was actually the former Blue Dragon Society assassin, Tang Ye. At this moment, an old man walked out from the small alley. It was the Ghostly Hand King. The Ghostly Hand King looked at Chu Xiu and said with a sigh, "As expected, people with ability don't have to worry about food and drink no matter where they go. In the Blue Dragon Society branch, you were a gold medal assassin, and now that you're in the Guangzhong torture room, you can actually sit in your inspector position so quickly." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. When he made his move before, he could roughly guess that the Black Shadow was Tang Ye. The other party's attainments in hidden weapons were very high. This was something Chu Xiu had already seen in the Blue Dragon Society, so he felt that the other party was a bit familiar. Seeing an old friend again, Chu Xiu said in a light voice, "The Heavenly Sin Branch leader is quite persistent. He even chased me all the way to the Guangzhong torture room. But I don't believe that the Heavenly Sin Branch leader would dare make a move in the Guangzhong torture room. This isn't the Northern Yen or West Chu, the Guangzhong torture room is the only place in the Guangzhong Pass. The Blue Dragon Society doesn't even have a branch here." The Ghostly Hand King shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Don't mention the Blue Dragon Society. I'm no longer a member of the Blue Dragon Society, so the Heavenly Sin Branch leader probably doesn't have the time to chase you right now." Chu Xiu slightly knit his brows. He thought that the Heavenly Sin Branch leader had chased him all the way to the Guangzhong torture room and that Tang Ye was like last time, purposely leaking some information to warn him. Who would have thought that the Ghostly Hand King would say something like this? "Oh? What's going on?" Chu Xiu asked. The Ghostly Hand King didn't directly answer Chu Xiu. Instead, he said to the alley behind him, "All right, come out." As the Ghostly Hand King's voice fell, more than 30 people walked out from the depths of the alley. Among them were the cruel sword, Yan Bugui, the fire slave, and the wolf king that Chu Xiu was familiar with. The rest were the Xiantian realm assassins of the Heavenly Sin Branch. However, at this time, they weren't wearing the clothes of the Blue Dragon Society, nor were they wearing the bamboo hats and masks of the Blue Dragon Society. The Ghostly Hand King said to Chu Xiu, "As you can see, we are no longer members of the Blue Dragon Society. This is a long story, and I have to start from the time when the Heavenly Sin Branch leader failed to kill you. Back then, you lured the people of the White Tiger Hall to attack the Heavenly Sin Branch leader. The martial artists of the White Tiger Hall were very strong, and the Heavenly Sin Branch leader's foundation was even weaker than the other party. However, the brute of the White Tiger Hall was too confident, and the Heavenly Sin Branch leader used a strange treasure to ambush him. He was heavily injured, and in the end, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader was able to kill him. That brute of the White Tiger Hall was a branch leader under the White Tiger Hall, and his status was the same as the Heavenly Sin Branch leaders. As an old enemy, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader killed a branch leader of the White Tiger Hall, which was a great merit. Relying on this merit, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader actually obtained the opportunity to return to the Blue Dragon Society headquarters. Of course, only the Heavenly Sin Branch leader has the qualifications to return to the headquarters. We naturally don't have the qualifications. At this point, the corners of the Ghost Hand King's mouth revealed a trace of incomprehension. When the Heavenly Sin Branch leader left, he only took one person with him as a trusted aide. That person was the Azure Lightning Sword, Chen Jiao. Chapter 171. Chu Xiu was rather astonished that the Heavenly Sin Branch Lord was able to kill the Branch Lord of the White Tiger Hall. According to Chu Xiu's expectations, both sides should have been heavily injured, or the Heavenly Sin Branch leader would have retreated. He didn't expect that the Heavenly Sin Branch leader, who was at a disadvantage in terms of cultivation, would be able to kill the White Tiger Branch leader. Judging from the Ghost Hand King's tone, he seemed to be disdainful of the Heavenly Sin Branch leader's decision to bring Chen Jiao to the headquarters. However, Chu Xiu felt that it was normal. There were many capable people in the Heavenly Sin Branch leader. The Heavenly Sin Branch leader could casually pick someone to be his confidant, and they would all be stronger than Chen Jiao, who was good at bootlicking. However, although these people were strong, they really weren't suitable to be confidants. Yan Bugue was cold and unsociable, and Tang Ya's personality was hard to fathom. Moreover, when the Heavenly Sin Branch leader wanted to find someone to attract attention as a chess piece, he chose Chu Xiu and Tang Ya. Although the Heavenly Sin Branch leader chose Chu Xiu in the end, he also listed Tang Ya as one of his targets. Tang Ya's heart was probably already cracked. As for the Ghost Hand King and the others, they were either too slippery or not strong enough, so Chen Jiao was really a good choice. Of course, Chen Jiao was also good at bootlicking. Chu Xiu looked at the Ghost Hand King and the others and frowned. If the Heavenly Sin Branch leader went to the headquarters, then he went to the headquarters. Why did you guys leave the Blue Dragon Society? There's only one Heavenly Sin Branch in East Yen. Although the Heavenly Sin Branch leader is a little weak, he still managed to set up the framework of the Heavenly Sin Branch. The Blue Dragon Society wouldn't cripple the Heavenly Sin Branch just because they lost the Heavenly Sin Branch leader, right? The Ghost Hand King smiled bitterly. Of course the Blue Dragon Society wouldn't cripple the Heavenly Sin Branch. Instead, the new branch leader brought a lot of killers with him, completely filling up the Heavenly Sin Branch. However, you should know the principle of a new ruler having a new set of officials. We are all veterans of the Sin Branch, and we are at a disadvantage in terms of numbers and strength. Without any backing, we will naturally be ostracized. You've seen the atmosphere when we were in the Heavenly Sin Division. There was almost no competition for missions. But now, even Tang Ya and Yan Bugue can't get a single mission for a month. Under such circumstances, what's the point of us staying in the Heavenly Sin Branch? Even if we transfer to another branch, the situation will probably be the same. That's why I discussed it with Tang Ya and the others and decided to leave the Blue Dragon Society. These are the only brothers who are willing to leave with us. Chu Xiu suddenly asked, the price of leaving the Blue Dragon Society isn't low, right? The Blue Dragon Society was not a charity, but an assassin organization. It was easy to join, but hard to leave. For some other martial arts sects, if they wanted to leave the sect, they would either become abandoned disciples who were chased, or they would return their cultivation to the sect. It was rare to find someone who could leave the sect in one piece. This was the case for normal martial arts sects, not to mention the Azure Dragon Society, which was evil. The Ghost Hand King was silent for a moment before saying, "We are not considered important members of the Blue Dragon Society. Moreover, the new branch leader doesn't like us and wants to kick us out, so he didn't make things too difficult for us. But even so, we all took the initiative to swallow the goo worms and swore a heart demon oath not to reveal any information or secrets about the Blue Dragon Society. Furthermore, we had to fork out almost a third of our mission rewards over the years before the branch allowed us to leave safely." Hearing the Ghost Hand King say this, Chu Xiu was a little surprised. The price they paid was really not small. Not to mention 1/3 of all the mission rewards, the Ghost Hand King and the others had to bleed a lot. Also, the goo worms were strange existences from Miaojiang. After making a heart demon oath, as long as one violated the oath, the goo worms would devour their heart and kill them. It was very vicious. Unless the person who swallowed the goo worms could cultivate to the second realm of the 3 realms of spirit focus, the realm of true fire refinement, and use the true martial pill to evolve the true fire in their body, only then could they completely burn the goo worms. "Then why did you come to find me this time?" Chu Xiu seemed to have faintly guessed the reason why the Ghost Hand King and the others came to find him. Hearing Chu Xiu's question, the Ghost Hand King's expression turned serious, and he said, "We joined the Blue Dragon Society for many years. Now that we have left the Blue Dragon Society, we don't want to go to the underworld to mess around. We assassins from the Blue Dragon Society are absolutely top-notch when it comes to killing people. However, because we have to carry out missions all year round, we don't have much time to cultivate in seclusion, so our cultivation speed is a bit slow. This time, after leaving the Blue Dragon Society, all we want is a stable place to stay. Official Chu, you and we are old friends. In the past, even if we participated in the pursuit of you, it was because we had no other choice. We can also see Division Leader Heavenly Sin's character. To be honest, this time we actually came to seek shelter from you. We don't have the ability Official Chu. You can directly join the Guangzhong torture room and become patrol agents, so as long as you give us the status of some ordinary constable or bailiff, we will be satisfied. We are all acquaintances. I believe Official Chu understands our strength. We don't dare to say that we are stronger than the warriors from the Guangzhong torture room, but at least we won't be a burden to you." This was a decision that the Ghost Hand King and the others made after thinking for a long time after leaving the Blue Dragon Society. They were all elite assassins of the Blue Dragon Society. To be a bit arrogant, the Ghost Hand King and the others were a bit proud. After being assassins for so many years, they couldn't say that they were the best among warriors of the same rank, but at least there were few who could match them. Therefore, after leaving the Blue Dragon Society, they thought of many places to go, but either they didn't like people, or people didn't like them because of their background. As for going their separate ways and becoming rogue warriors in the pugilistic world, they weren't willing to do so casually. At this time, they occasionally heard some traveling merchants talking about the tragedy of the Jiang family in the Guangxi Jianghu prefecture being annihilated. They were all condemning the new patrol agent Chu Xiu for his ruthlessness and tyranny, saying that the Jianghu prefecture would have a hard time in the future, and so on. When the Ghost Hand King and the others heard this, they immediately went to ask around and found out that the new patrol agent Chu Xiu they were talking about was actually their former colleague from the Blue Dragon Society. When they first heard this news, the Ghost Hand King and the others couldn't help but be stunned. Even now, they still couldn't figure out Chu Xiu's identity. This guy went from an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society to a member of the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army of Eastern Qi. The Ghost Hand King and the others thought that he had returned to Eastern Qi, but in the blink of an eye, he became the patrol agent of the Guangzhong torture room. What was going on? However, after understanding the power and status of the patrol agent, the Ghost Hand King had an idea, and that was to rely on Chu Xiu and join the Guangzhong torture room. This wasn't a whim of the Ghost Hand King, but a decision he made after thinking about it for a long time. If Chu Xiu was able to become a patrol agent in the Guangzhong Pass, it was naturally not a big deal for them, assassins from the Blue Dragon Society. Moreover, in terms of influence, the Guanzhong torture room was stronger than the Blue Dragon Society, so joining the Guanzhong torture room wasn't a disgrace to them. Most importantly, there was an acquaintance, Chu Xiu, in the Guanzhong torture room. When they were in the Blue Dragon Society, they had worked with Chu Xiu for a long time, so they understood Chu Xiu's character. His ability and strength were impeccable. Most importantly, Chu Xiu wasn't an extremely egoistic person like the Heavenly Sin Division leader. He could accept others, and joining Chu Xiu's service was better than following a superior like the Heavenly Sin Division leader. Therefore, when the Ghost Hand King told the others about this matter, it was immediately approved by most of them. For the Ghost Hand King, who was in the inner invulnerability realm, Chu Xiu's ability and strength were stronger than theirs. They had a clear understanding of this in the Blue Dragon Society. Even assassins like Fire Slave and Wolf King would follow Chu Xiu when they carried out their missions. Therefore, they didn't have any psychological burden or dissatisfaction when they became Chu Xiu's subordinates from colleagues. The ones who had some problems were Tang Ye and Yan Bugui. They were both in the physical invulnerability realm like Chu Xiu, and they were on the same level in the Blue Dragon Society. They were all 5th level assassins. Would they be willing to be Chu Xiu's subordinates now? However, after the Ghost Hand King and the others agreed, Tang Ye and Yan Bugui didn't have any objections after thinking about it. They also agreed with the Ghost Hand King's suggestion. Yan Bugui's thinking was very simple. As long as he could kill people, he would be given cultivation resources. It didn't matter where he was. As for Tang Ye, even the Ghost Hand King couldn't guess what he was thinking. The Ghost Hand King solemnly cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and said, "Official Chu, to put it bluntly, this time we are here to seek refuge with you. If you agree, we will work together again and respect you as our master. If you don't agree, we won't continue to pester you because of our past relationship. We won't talk about the things you did in the Blue Dragon Society. The choice is in official Chu's hands." The Ghost Hand King was a very tactful person. In the past, when he was in the Blue Dragon Society, he would call Chu Xiu by his name. Now that he had decided to seek refuge with Chu Xiu, he naturally had to correct his position. Addressing him as Lord already proved Ghost Hand King's current position and thoughts. Looking at these people from the Blue Dragon Society, Chu Xiu revealed a smile. He cupped his hands and said, "Since everyone thinks highly of me, Chu Xiu, and traveled thousands of miles to join me, I, Chu Xiu, naturally won't be unreasonable. In the past, we worked together in the Blue Dragon Society. You all know my personality and way of doing things. If you don't betray me, I won't betray you either. What you can obtain under me will definitely be more than what you obtained in the Blue Dragon Society." Hearing Chu Xiu say this, the Ghost Hand King and the others bowed in unison and said, "Greetings, official Chu." At this time, even the eccentric and cold Yan Bugui cupped his hands. He didn't say anything, but this was enough to show his attitude. Chapter 172. The Ghost Hand King and the others had left the Blue Dragon Society and came to seek refuge with him. This was definitely a pleasant surprise for Chu Xiu. The Ghost Hand King and the others wanted to find a new place to settle down. Didn't Chu Xiu also need a group of powerful and reliable subordinates? To be honest, the people under Chu Xiu's current subordinates were just passable in terms of strength and reliability. Lu Chengli and Qin Fang's strength was barely passable, but they were both veterans in the Guanzhong torture room. They were rather slippery and liked to leave some leeway when doing things. Du Guangzhong was a bit better, but he was a bit inflexible and couldn't accomplish great things. The most important thing was that the three of them were threatened by Chu Xiu to join his subordinates. It was inevitable that they would have other thoughts in their hearts. Perhaps when Chu Xiu displayed absolute strength or when his own forces became stronger, these people would truly pledge their loyalty to Chu Xiu. But now, Chu Xiu didn't think that they would be of one mind with him. Moreover, Chu Xiu wasn't too satisfied with the strength of the other constables and bailiffs. Perhaps because he was used to dealing with the killers of the Blue Dragon Society, in Chu Xiu's mind, only the killers of the Blue Dragon Society could be considered as the true elites. The constables of the Guangzhong torture room were best at solving cases and deducing the information of the killers based on various traces. In terms of pure killing methods, they weren't as good as the killers of the Blue Dragon Society. The arrival of the Ghost Hand King and the others could be considered to have completely made up for the combat strength of Chu Xiu's subordinates. It could actually make the strength of Chu Xiu's subordinates skyrocket. Chu Xiu said to the Ghost Hand King and the others, "Find a place to stay today. Tomorrow morning, I'll send someone to pick you up and officially let you join the Guangzhong torture room." The strength of the Ghost Hand King and the others were in the innate, inner, and physical invulnerability realms. The positions that Chu Xiu could give them were only ordinary constables and bailiffs. Therefore, he had the right to appoint them without even needing Wei Jiuduan's consent. Tomorrow, he just needed to introduce the Ghost Hand King and the others to the Jianghu Inspector Hall, register their identities, and send them to the Guanxi Torture Hall for records and backup. In the end, Chu Xiu added, "All of you are considered to be newcomers. After you join the Jian Province's Inspector Hall tomorrow, it will be very easy for you to encounter some problems. When the time comes, you might need to display your strength." The Ghost Hand King smiled, "We know the rules. Not only in the Guangzhong torture room, but also in Jianzhou Inspector Master. Who would take you seriously if you were new here and had no strength?" This kind of thing happened to Chu Xiu when he first joined the Blue Dragon Society. Now, it was their turn. On the morning of the second day, the entire patrol hall was discussing the matter of someone sneaking into the hall that night. However, before they could discuss further, Du Guangzhong and the others received news that a few of the pugilistic world's constables were to make a trip to the meeting hall. Chu Xiu had something to tell them. When Du Guangzhong and the others arrived at the conference hall, they were surprised to find that there were already 5 people sitting in the conference hall. There were both inner and physical invulnerability experts. Chu Xiu introduced, "These are my good friends from the Blue Dragon Society." Because of the internal strife of the Blue Dragon Society, they chose to leave the Blue Dragon Society. Now that they have nowhere to go, they are also preparing to join the Guangzhong torture room and appoint them as constables of the Jianzhou Inspector Hall. There are also more than 30 other people who will also join the Jianzhou Inspector Hall. Chu Xiu pointed at Du Guangzhong and the other 2 and said, "These 3 are the veteran constables of the Jianzhou Inspector Hall. Du Guangzhong, Lu Chengli, and Qin Fang, we will be colleagues from now on. Now that we know each other, it will be easier for us to cooperate in the future." As soon as Chu Xiu said this, Du Guangzhong and the other 2 showed vigilance and resistance in their eyes. It was a good thing that the Jianzhou Inspector Hall became more powerful, but the sudden appearance of so many experts was not necessarily a good thing for them. Currently, they were in charge of most of the matters of the Jianzhou Inspector Hall, but now that so many people suddenly appeared, would they seize their authority? They naturally could not stop Chu Xiu from appointing anyone as constables of the Jianzhou Inspector Hall, but it did not mean that they would not express their opinions on this matter. Smiling, Lu Chengli said, "Since you're all friends of Exalted Chu, and you're all from the Azure Dragon Society, I'm sure you're all very strong. With your addition, the power of the Jianzhou Inspector Hall will definitely increase greatly. This cup of tea is for you all, and I hope that you will take care of me in the future." As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Chengli suddenly swung his hand and made a gesture of offering tea. However, the earth energy in his body suddenly exploded in his hands, and the teacup directly flew out of his hand, blasting towards the Ghost Hand King and the others. As the teacup approached, the lid suddenly opened, and the tea wrapped in earth energy shot towards the Ghost Hand King and the others like a sharp arrow. Tangya took a step forward and waved with one hand. The speed was so fast that one could not even see the trajectory, but wisps of earth energy wrapped around the tea without leaving a trace, like a net, and sent the tea back into the teacup. Tangya took the teacup with ease and took a sip of tea, then said with a smile, "Thank you, Lord Lu. Actually, we should be the ones who need to take care of you." Seeing Tangya's casual action, Lu Chungli's expression suddenly became solemn. In front of Chu Xiu, he did not dare to go too far, so just now he was just testing the other party. He wanted to let the tea splash on the other party, and make him look a little embarrassed. However, who would have thought that the other party would show such control of earth energy that even he was shocked. Although this degree of control of earth energy did not represent one's own strength, it also proved that the person in front of him was absolutely extraordinary. And at this time, Yen Bugui, who had been silent all this time, took off the huge sword on his back, and casually placed it on the ground. This seemingly casual placing of the sword caused the ground to shake, as if there was an earthquake, but there was not the slightest crack on the ground. This move caused the expressions of Du Guangzhong and the others to change slightly. This move was even more direct than the control of earth energy that Tangya had shown just now. What Yen Bugui had shown was the control of strength. It was easy to lift something heavy as if it was light, but it was difficult to lift something light as if it was heavy. Yen Bugui's control of strength had already reached the point where he could control the weight of his strength freely. He could cause the earth to shake without damaging the ground. Now, if his sword were to slash at a piece of tofu, the tofu would not be damaged in the slightest, and the stone slabs or even iron slabs would shatter the tofu. Lu Chungli and the others looked at each other, and did not say anything. At this point, there was no longer a need to probe. As expected of an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society. Not to mention anything else, his strength was indeed the best among warriors of the same level, and this also gave them some pressure. In the past, they were the only ones under Chu Xiu. Although it could not be said that they were slacking, at least they did not feel any pressure, because other than them, Chu Xiu also had no one else he could use. But now, these people from the Blue Dragon Society had come, and they were even old acquaintances of Chu Xiu. They were no longer the only ones. Looking at the people on both sides below, Chu Xiu did not directly state his position. It was good for his subordinates to have disagreements and competition, but it was taboo to be in harmony or a pool of stagnant water. Of course, he would not be as stupid as the Heaven Sin branch leader, who would deliberately provoke his subordinates and deliberately divide them. That was purely looking for death. Looking at the people below, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "All right, stop probing each other. Because the Ghost Hand King and the others have just arrived, they will not directly manage the affairs of the patrol hall. They are not familiar with it, and they do not understand it. Therefore, I will be in charge of it for the time being." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Du Guangzhong and the others let out a long sigh of relief. However, Chu Xiu continued, "It is just that the people under me, Chu Xiu, do not look at qualifications, only strength. Right now, the power of my Jianghu prefecture's patrol hall has greatly increased, and the demand has also greatly increased. It is time to do something. Whether it is the cultivation resources or the power in my hands, I will not directly give them to you. Instead, you will have to fight for them yourselves. Whoever has the ability will be promoted. It is simple, direct, and fair. Isn't that right?" Du Guangzhong and the others immediately stood up and cupped their hands, saying, "Yes, sir." As long as Chu Xiu did not show favoritism and directly competed with the people of the Blue Dragon Society, they were not afraid. The killers of the Blue Dragon Society were indeed the elites of the elites, but the martial artists of the Guangzhong torture room were not bad either. Moreover, this was the Guangzhong torture room. These people from the Blue Dragon Society had just arrived, so they were definitely not as familiar with the place. In this place, killing people was not the only thing that could solve everything. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Old Du, bring some people to the Jianghu prefecture and send invitations to all the local martial arts forces. 3 days later at noon, I will invite them to a banquet in the Jianghu prefecture's Phoenix Cry restaurant. Let the masters of each force come in person. Of course, it is fine if they do not come, but let them imagine the consequences themselves. Du Guangzhong and the others nodded when they heard this. They had already expected this. The Jianghu Prefecture's Inspector Hall had already established its prestige in the Jianghu Prefecture, and this prestige was built on the premise that the Jiang family was exterminated. Normally, after the Jiang family was exterminated, these local martial arts forces should have come to visit the Jianghu Prefecture. However, because Chu Xiu was a little too aggressive in the Jiang family's extermination, these sects and aristocratic families were a little conflicted, so they did not come. Since they did not come, Chu Xiu could only take the initiative to take action. Right now, Chu Xiu had already been in seclusion for a month. He seemed to be very low-key, but in fact, he was just sharpening his knife. Now, the blade had been sharpened to a very sharp point. Moreover, he had managed to catch up with Ghost Hand King and the others who had come to seek shelter. This was a pleasant surprise for Chu Xiu. The strength of his subordinates had skyrocketed, and it was time to use the blade. Following Chu Xiu's order, Du Guangzhong immediately asked his constables to send the news to the major sects and aristocratic families. However, after these sects and aristocratic families received the news, they did not immediately decide whether to go or not. Instead, they first gathered together and secretly contacted each other to gather information. Chapter 173. There were more than 10 small cities in Jianghu Prefecture, and there were dozens of martial arts forces among them. However, those that could stand on the stage had at least a physical invulnerability realm martial artist in charge. There were about 12 or 3 such martial arts forces, and their strength was not too weak. In the past, the Guangzhong torture room was weak, but it did not mean that the local martial arts forces in Jianghu Prefecture were weak. The Jiang family was one of the top martial forces in Jianghu Prefecture, but they were destroyed by Chu Xiu without hesitation some time ago. This made the other martial arts forces in Jianghu Prefecture angry but also a little afraid. They could not help but recall some memories hidden in the bottom of their hearts. In the past, when Guan Siyu had just taken over the Guangzhong torture room, outsiders said that he was impartial and merciless. He even crippled and killed his own disciples. However, it was important to note that this was only how Guan Siyu treated his own people. He was already so harsh to his own people, so how could he show mercy to outsiders? In the past, when Guan Siyu had just taken over the Guangzhong Punishment Hall, she had killed many people and destroyed many sects in order to stabilize the order of the Guangzhong Punishment Hall. She only stopped when everyone was killed to the point that they no longer dared to violate the rules of the Guangzhong Punishment Hall. Chu Xiu's cruel methods of doing things were somewhat similar to Guan Siyu's in the past. In the Luo family of Luocheng, the heads of the 12 major forces in Jianghu Prefecture were all gathered here. The Luo family was a big family of the same level as the Jiang family in the past. The Jiang family was known as Jiang Bancheng in Qi City, and the Luo family was in Luocheng. Even Luocheng was built because of the existence of the Luo family. At this time, in a secret room in the Luo family, people from the 12 major forces in Jianghu Prefecture were all present. The Luo family's great ancestor also had the cultivation of the three-flower realm. Although he looked old, he was not as old as the Jiang family's great ancestor. The power of the Luo family was also in the hands of the Luo family's great ancestor. At this time, there were 12 people in the meeting hall. In the end, these 12 people were either sitting there with their eyes fixed on their noses and mouths, not saying a word. Or they were drinking tea as if the Luo family's tea was some kind of delicacy. The Luo family patriarch wore a black brocade robe with cloud patterns. Although his hair was a little white, it was neat and tidy. Seeing everyone's reaction, the Luo family's ancestor couldn't help but frown. I say, everyone, it was you who suggested to find a place to discuss this matter. In the end, my Luo family has provided such an opportunity and a place, but in the end, none of you said anything. What is the meaning of this? When they heard the Luo clan's ancestor, all of them started to discuss in low voices. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man who was dressed like a scholar stood up and cupped his hands. Everyone, all of you've seen Chu Xiu's way of doing things. He's vicious, merciless, and doesn't give anyone any face. He's completely ruthless and doesn't care about rules or reason at all. Not to mention the Jiang clan, we have also done such a thing. Everyone, don't be in a hurry to shirk responsibility. Who dares to say that none of you have violated the rules of the Guanzhong torture hall? If Chu Xiu treats the Jiang family like this, then there's no need to mention how he treats us. Therefore, this time, when Chu Xiu invited us to the banquet, it's most likely not a good banquet. The scholar who spoke was the sect leader of the Jianghu Prefecture's Divine Feathers sect, Soaring Feather Falcon, Chen Gongtai. He was most proficient in speed-type movement techniques and had a cultivation of the physical invulnerability realm. Hearing Chen Gongtai's words, a rough-looking man dressed in black scratched his head and said, "Old Cheng's words make sense. This Chu Xiu doesn't have any good intentions at all. Look at the time he invited us to the banquet. It's exactly noon. Who would choose such an inauspicious time to invite us? What is he trying to do? Execute us at noon?" This black-robed man, Do Weihu, was the hall leader of the Haiyan Hall in the Jianghu Prefecture. He was born in the wilderness and eventually established the Haiyan Hall. His history was short, only slightly more than 10 years. However, he was very strong. Although he was only at the physical invulnerability realm, his physical cultivation was extremely terrifying. After hearing Do Weihu's words, someone else chimed in, "That's right. After this Chu Xiu annihilated the Jiang family, he didn't wait for us to pay our respects. This time, he's probably going to take action personally. When that time comes, we don't even know whether we'll be greeted with swords or wine." Following these two people's words, the crowd began to discuss again. It was much livelier than before. However, this time, the crowd seemed more like they were chatting and bragging. After talking for a long time, no one could come up with a concrete plan. Looking at this chaotic scene, the Luo family patriarch shouted in a low voice, "All of you, shut up." Everyone gathered together to come up with ideas, not to chat. Right now, all the sects in the Jianghu Prefecture are under the pressure of Lord Chu Xiu. This time, what kind of attitude should we use to face Lord Chu Xiu? In fact, should we go or not go? Everyone, please come up with a plan. Everyone looked at each other, then at each other, but no one said a word. In the end, Do Weihu from the Haiyan Hall sneered and said, "You guys are too cowardly. What's there to discuss about this? Since the other party is planning a Hongmen banquet, why don't we just not go? No matter how domineering Chu Xiu is, he can't attack us just because we don't go to the banquet. It's true that a martial arts faction can't stop the Jianghu Prefecture's Inspector Hall. However, what if all the martial arts factions in the Jianghu Prefecture unite together? I don't believe that Chu Xiu would dare to force us all to rebel." The people from the martial arts factions all nodded. What Do Weihu said made sense. Guanzhong was not the chaotic land of the past. Now, there were still rules. Chu Xiu could be domineering, but he could not run amok. If he dared to force all the martial arts factions in the Jianghu Prefecture to rebel, this matter would definitely alarm the headquarters. At that time, Chu Xiu would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. This matter was no longer something that Wei Jiuduan could suppress. However, after discussing for a long time, they still could not come to a conclusion. In the end, they could not even come to a conclusion on whether they should accept Chu Xiu's invitation to attend the banquet 3 days later. In the end, everyone could only leave with their own thoughts. After everyone left, the Luo family patriarch rubbed his eyebrows tiredly. A few martial artists from the core generation of the Luo family walked out. One of them asked, "Patriarch, have you come to a conclusion?" The Luo family patriarch snorted coldly when he heard that and said, "Come to a fart." Even at this point, this bunch of idiots still have their own plans. Everyone has their own schemes in their hearts. Without a knife to their necks, it's impossible to join forces. If my Luo family really joins forces with this bunch of idiots, I'm afraid we'll die even faster. Then, are we going out on Chu Xiu's invitation this time? The martial artist asked. The Luo family patriarch said indifferently, "Of course we're going. Why not? The shot shoots the bird that sticks out. The Jiang family has already taken care of this bird that sticks out. My Luo family naturally can't be the second. Let's see. When the time comes, we just need to see this Chu Xiu's attitude and act according to the crowd." In the past, the Jiang family hooked up with Wei Jiuduan and developed their business and family's strength wantonly. They even faintly had the reputation of being the #1 family in the Jianghu prefecture. Back then, you were still envious and prepared to learn from the Jiang family. In the end, what about now? Do you still want to learn from the Jiang family? Remember, it's not that easy to be first, and it's the same for the second. So, our Luo family doesn't seek to be first or second. We just want to be third or fourth. That way, we can live longer. The martial artists of the Luo family all nodded. At the moment, the power of the Luo family was still in the hands of the Luo family patriarch. As long as the patriarch said something, regardless of whether they understood it or not, they just needed to remember it. 3 days later, in the Phoenix restaurant, Chu Xiu directly booked the largest restaurant in the Jianghu city, the Phoenix restaurant. The banquet was held on the 6th floor of the Phoenix restaurant. The Guangzhong area was located in the center of the three countries, so the food also had the style of the three countries. As the inspector of the Jianghu prefecture, Chu Xiu also had the backing of a small local force in the Jianghu city. This time, in order to please Chu Xiu, they also put in a lot of effort and put in all kinds of delicacies. Chu Xiu had arrived at the main seat a long time ago. There were 12 seats below him. It was not even noon yet, but people from various martial arts factions had arrived one after another. Those who arrived first were the weaker martial arts forces. They didn't think too much about it, purely because they didn't want to offend Chu Xiu. The Luo family patriarch was the fourth to enter. Although he had the cultivation of the three-flower realm at one's prominence, he still took the initiative to greet Chu Xiu and said, "Official Chu is indeed worthy of being a young talent on the Longhu list. As expected, you are outstanding, young, and promising." The Luo family patriarch was old friends with the Jiang family patriarch in the past. They had worked together and fought each other, so he had a good understanding of the Jiang family patriarch's strength. Now, he was so polite to Chu Xiu not only because of Chu Xiu's status, but also because Chu Xiu had the strength to kill the Jiang family patriarch. Based on this alone, they were on equal footing. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Old Master Luo, you're too polite. You're a senior in the martial arts world, so please take care of me in the future." The Luo family patriarch chuckled and said, Sure. I believe that the Jianghu prefecture will be even more glorious under the leadership of official Chu in the future." As the two of them pretentiously flattered each other, many people from other martial arts forces also arrived one after another. Chen Gongtai of the Divine Feather sect, who previously said that Chu Xiu was up to no good, came, and so did Do Weihu of the Haiyan Hall. Seeing Do Weihu walk in, the rest of the people cursed in their hearts. This boor looked rough, but in reality, he was the most scheming. Back when they were at the Luo family patriarch, Do Weihu said that Chu Xiu's banquet was a trap and that he wouldn't come. In the end, didn't he come obediently? If there was really an idiot who listened to Do Weihu and didn't come, then that person would really stand out. At that time, he would probably become Chu Xiu's primary target. Chapter 174. There were a total of 12 martial arts factions that were invited by Chu Xiu. They were pretty much all the martial arts factions in the entire Jianghu prefecture. However, at this time, the 12 seats were not filled. One person did not come. Everyone present had a strange expression on their faces. The person who did not come was from the Gao family of Wen City. He was not considered strong and could only be ranked last among the martial arts factions in the Jianghu prefecture. They did not expect that the Gao family would be so unyielding. Faced with Chu Xiu's invitation, he actually did not come. Chu Xiu's expression did not change in the slightest. After noon, when the person still did not arrive, Chu Xiu said directly, "Remove the seat." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, a small constable immediately walked over and removed the seat. Looking at everyone present, Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Since I took over the Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall, this is the first time I have met all of you face to face. Therefore, I would like to propose a toast to all of you." Just as Chu Xiu picked up his wine cup, a middle-aged martial artist wearing a blue brocade robe suddenly walked in from outside. He had physical invulnerability realm cultivation. The moment he came in, he smiled and said, "My apologies, Official Chu. My Wen City is a little far from Jianghu City, so I am late. Please forgive me, Official Chu." Chu Xiu put down his cup and sized up the Gao family master. He said calmly, "Late? All right then, find a place to sit." The Gao family master hurriedly wanted to take a seat, but he was shocked to find that there was no seat for him at the table. He could not help but smile awkwardly and said, "Official Chu, there is no seat left." Chu Xiu's expression instantly darkened. He said coldly, "Since you know there is no seat for you, then why are you still not getting out?" The Gao family master's expression changed. "Official Chu, what do you mean by this? I only came a little late. Are you not going to give me face? You're even more arrogant than Lord Disciplinary Officer." Chu Xiu said coldly, "I don't like people who are late. I've already given you enough face by personally inviting you to the banquet. Now that you're late, you've thrown away this face yourself. You can't even come to my banquet late, which proves that you don't take me, Chu Xiu, seriously. I give you face, but you don't want a seat? Get out of here." Chu Xiu's words made the face of the Gao family's patriarch flush red. No matter what, he was still the head of a family and was ranked among the many martial arts forces in Jianghu Prefecture. But now, he was humiliated by Chu Xiu in front of everyone. How could he get out of this embarrassing situation? Therefore, the Gao family head pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted, "Chu Xiu, don't go too far. You should know." However, before he could finish speaking, Chu Xiu's figure moved, and in the blink of an eye, he had already appeared in front of the Gao family's patriarch. His hand formed a fist seal, the army formula, the Great UnparalleledSwordWill seal. Slaying evil and subduing demons, unstoppable. Golden Gang Qi shone in the meeting hall. No one present expected Chu Xiu to suddenly make a move. Even the Gao family head himself did not expect it. When this incomparably majestic seal appeared in front of him, the Gao family head struck out with his palm. Gang Qi erupted, wanting to block it. Although Chu Xiu had not reached the peak of the physical invulnerability realm, his strength was already enough to crush martial artists of the same level. Among martial artists of the same level, only the direct disciples of a powerhouse like Yuqi or Tangya, who was also from the Blue Dragon Society and had extremely strong combat strength, could fight him. However, the Gao family head in front of him had obviously not reached this level. His strength was even inferior to Du Guangzhong and other Jianghu detectives. The power of the fast and slow 9 words formula was extremely powerful. As the fiercest and most overbearing style of the 9 words formula, the Great UnparalleledSwordWill seal was not something that the Gao family head could easily resist. When Chu Xiu's seal fell, the Golden Gang Qi exploded in an instant, enveloping the Gao family head. After a fierce explosion of Gang Qi, everyone could clearly hear the sound of bones cracking. The Gao family head's arms were twisted like fried dough twists. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was directly sent flying. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Seeing Chu Xiu's move, everyone present immediately held their breath and did not make a sound. Even the great ancestor of the Luo family and the other two martial artists of the Three-Flower Realm at one's prominence did not speak. They had long since heard of Chu Xiu's battle prowess. However, now that they had seen Chu Xiu cripple a cultivator of the same cultivation level as him with a single move and beat him to the point where it was unknown whether he was dead or alive, such terrifying battle prowess still shocked them. Moreover, this time, it was the Gao family head who had a death wish. No one could say anything about Chu Xiu teaching him a lesson, so naturally, no one stood up for him. Wen City was far from the Jianghu prefecture, but it was not so far that it would take 3 days to get there. Not to mention riding a horse, they could walk there. The Gao family head might have really planned not to come, but they were still worried. So, they arrived in Jianghu City in advance and waited at the entrance of the restaurant, wanting to see who was not coming. If an expert like the great ancestor of the Luo family did not come, then he would directly leave. Therefore, the Gao family head had been waiting at the entrance the whole time. At the end of the wait, he realized that everyone had already arrived. It turned out that his action was not because he was clever, but because he was really stupid. Thinking of this, the Gao family head hurriedly wanted to come in, but it was already too late. Chu Xiu had directly removed him from his position. There was only one chance, and Chu Xiu would only give face once. The Gao family head did not grasp the opportunity, so he could not blame anyone else. Throw this idiot out. Don't disturb everyone's drinking mood. After Chu Xiu gave the order, someone immediately carried the half-dead Gao family head away. Chu Xiu stretched out his hand, and the Ghost Hand King personally handed a white towel to Chu Xiu. Turning around, Chu Xiu wiped the blood on his hand and revealed a smile, saying, "Everyone, let's continue the conversation. Don't let the disturbance of an idiot spoil our mood." Picking up the wine cup, Chu Xiu said, "As I said, this cup of wine is to everyone." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu drank the wine in his cup. The others did the same. With the previous example, no one dared to not give face to Chu Xiu now. Then, Chu Xiu continued, "This second cup of wine is to the Guanzhong torture room. Guanzhong is located between 3 countries. Everyone can look at the history. Throughout history, which place like this has not been extremely miserable, covered in the flames of war all day long? The Guanzhong torture room's contributions cannot go unnoticed for all of you to be able to live so comfortably now. Therefore, this second cup is to the Guanzhong torture room." Chu Xiu had spoken in such a dignified manner, so everyone did not say anything. They all drank a cup of wine in unison. Pouring the wine in front of them to the brim, Chu Xiu said, "As for the third cup, there's no hurry to drink it. It won't be too late to drink it after the discussion." Everyone present looked at each other. The main show had finally come. What exactly Chu Xiu wanted to do would be revealed now. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "The Guanzhong area is connected to 3 countries. Although the punishment hall does not allow smuggling, I believe that everyone here has done it many times. You must have earned a lot, right?" The expressions of everyone present immediately changed. This was the unspoken rule of the Guanzhong area. In the Guanzhong area, which martial arts faction had done this kind of thing openly or secretly? The only difference was that some people did it more and some people did it less. But no matter how many, it was somewhat inappropriate to say such things in broad daylight. Therefore, just as everyone wanted to say something, they were stopped by Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Everyone, we are all on the same side now, so there is no need to be secretive. I, Chu Xiu, am different from the previous inspector, Fang Xingyuan. I am actually very easy to talk to. Only by making things convenient for others can it be convenient for myself. In this world, power, fame, beauty, or wealth is what everyone strives for. It's not shameful to follow one's heart's desires and desires. The martial arts world in Guangzhou had never been orthodox, but it was not evil either. Now that Chu Xiu had said it so openly, they were still not used to it. Chu Xiu continued, right now, all the smuggling businesses in Jianghu Prefecture are controlled by you, so what you have is wealth. As the inspector of Jianghu Prefecture, what I have is power. With the two combined, we will definitely be able to obtain more than what we have now. Therefore, this third cup of wine is a toast to the cooperation with all of you. After drinking this cup of wine, we will all be friends. We will get rich together, and we will focus on money together. Chu Xiu slammed the wine cup on the table and looked around at everyone present. Everyone's expression changed slightly, and they looked at each other. The Luo clan patriarch coughed and asked, I wonder what kind of cooperation official Chu is talking about. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, it's very simple. Right now, in my opinion, your smuggling businesses are basically a mess. Everyone is doing their own thing, sneaking around, and there is no order to speak of. If we are to cooperate, we will have to replan our respective businesses. For example, the Luo clan will only deal in minerals, the Divine Feathers sect will deal in elixirs, and the Haiyan Hall will deal in weapons. Each party will control a business in order to avoid conflict with each other and directly monopolize it. They will lower the purchasing price and raise the selling price. As long as the other party wants to do business in Jianghu Prefecture, they will have to follow the rules here. In this way, won't your profits increase? As soon as he said this, everyone's eyes lit up. Smuggling could be done in such a way. Right now, the smuggling business in Jianghu Prefecture was indeed as Chu Xiu had said. It was quite chaotic on the whole. Everyone was doing their own thing, and there were many conflicts between them. Why were the 12 martial arts factions not united? It was because there were many conflicts of interest between them, and they often fought or even killed each other to form a grudge. If they did as Chu Xiu said, everyone would work together and monopolize their own businesses. This could indeed prevent such a situation from happening, and this method would also have great benefits both internally and externally. Chapter 175. The secret smuggling business in Jianghu was no different from other places in Guangzhou. It was a mess, both internally and externally. If they worked together, they could lower the purchase price and then raise the selling price, just like Chu Xiu had said. At present, most of the caravans from the 3 countries in Guangzhou had rushed to Guangzhou and sold the contraband they carried to the local gangsters for them to hide. In this way, they could avoid being discovered by the people in the Guangzhou torture room. In the past, these smuggled contraband did not have a fixed price. The foreign merchants would quote a price, and the local martial arts forces would buy it. If the price was too low, the foreign merchants would just go to other forces. Similarly, these martial arts forces could also sell some smuggled contraband goods to other places after purchasing them. The price could not be too expensive, otherwise, people could just look for other aristocratic families. In any case, there were more than 10 martial arts forces in Jianghu Prefecture. If they did as Chu Xiu said, they could lower the price to the extreme and raise it to the extreme. At that time, their income could really double. Of course, no matter if they lowered or raised it, it could not be too exaggerated. Otherwise, the foreign merchants were not idiots. At worst, they could just leave for a while and go to other prefectures to trade. At this time, everyone present was thinking about how many times their income could be multiplied if they did as Chu Xiu said. Only the Luo family's patriarch asked first, Official Chu, we have seen the benefits you mentioned. What do you want from us by doing this? Chu Xiu glanced at the Luo family's patriarch and said slowly, I said, now I have the power, and you have the money. What I want is naturally money. As a warrior, all kinds of cultivation resources are bought with money. Also, it's time for my brothers in the Jianghu prefecture's inspector to start eating. After you and I cooperate, I will send people into your families. They will not interfere with your business, only your income. From then on, 20% of your income will be mine. As soon as he said that, the crowd burst into an uproar. They looked at Chu Xiu as if they had seen a ghost. Previously, they had heard that Chu Xiu was extremely greedy when dealing with the Jiang clan. It could be said that he was an exorbitant person, asking for a tenth of the Jiang clan's assets. Now that they saw it, Chu Xiu's appetite was really big. This time, he didn't ask for the family's assets, but directly asked for 20% of their business. The family property was given to them in a lump sum, but the 20% of the business income had to be exploited. How could they tolerate this? The Heavenly Feather sect's Chen Gongtai immediately stood up and said, "Official Chu, you want 20% of our business right off the bat. Why? Just based on that idea of yours? Isn't this a little too much?" Chu Xiu spun the wine glass in his hand and said faintly, "That idea was just a gift from me. The more money you guys earn, the more I'll earn. As for why I want 20% of your income, I've already made it very clear before. You guys have the money, but I have the power." As Chu Xiu raised his head and looked at Chen Gongtai, a cold and gloomy aura blew over, causing Chen Gongtai to shiver. Don't forget what kind of place this is. There are some businesses that you can only do if I let you do it. If I don't let you do it, you won't even get a single copper coin. Everyone looked at Chu Xiu. It was only now that they had witnessed Chu Xiu's tyranny. On the surface, it was a cooperation between the two parties, with Chu Xiu taking 20% of the income. However, after hearing Chu Xiu's words, they finally understood that the so-called 20% of the income was simply a protection fee. If they handed over 20% of the income, they could openly carry out the smuggling business in the Jianghu prefecture and form a monopoly. Chu Xiu, the patrol inspector, would protect them. However, if they didn't hand over the income, the Jiang family's fate was already in front of everyone. They would be directly charged with a crime, and without any evidence, they would be directly destroyed. Chu Xiu looked at the people in front of him, raised the wine glass in his hand, and said faintly, "This glass of wine is a toast to all of you. Drink it, and our cooperation will be considered to have begun. You can choose for yourselves." Everyone present looked at each other, but no one raised their glasses. 20% of the income sounded simple, but it was like cutting off their own flesh. Who wouldn't feel the pain of cutting off their own flesh? Moreover, this piece of flesh would be cut off for a lifetime. Although the income described by Chu Xiu seemed to be very attractive, who would be willing to cut off their own flesh like this before seeing a certain amount of income? Moreover, although the destruction of the Jiang family last time had shocked them, now that more than a dozen of them were together, their power was not something that the Jiang family could compare to. Chu Xiu could annihilate the Jiang clan, but could he annihilate all of them? Most importantly, at present, if most of them agreed, even if the others felt the pain, they could only follow suit. However, now that everyone was silent, who would be the first to raise their glass in agreement? Wouldn't that be the idiot who took the initiative to cut off their own flesh? Therefore, until now, no one spoke. After a long while, Chu Xiu put down his glass and said faintly, "It seems that I, Chu Xiu, am still not respected enough. Even when I took the initiative to propose a toast, no one actually drank it. However, it doesn't matter. I believe that one day, everyone will drink this glass of wine. Everyone, you can leave now." Hearing Chu Xiu say this, everyone present immediately heaved a sigh of relief. They knew that with more than a dozen of them gathered together, Chu Xiu couldn't touch them, nor did he have the strength to do so. The group of people directly left after saying a few pleasantries. In an instant, the huge restaurant became a little empty. Seeing this, Du Guangzhong walked to Chu Xiu's side and said with some hesitation, "My lord, Chu Xiu raised his hand and interrupted Du Guangzhong's words. He picked up his glass and drank the wine in it in one gulp. A cold light appeared in his eyes as he said, "Since you refuse a toast, you will drink a forfeit." Majesty was always more memorable than Shinis, and this was the case no matter where it was. Most people only learned to eat and not to be beaten. Only when they were beaten to the point of pain and fear would they learn. It was not that they were stupid, nor was it that they were greedy. It was human nature. In this martial world, there were always very few people who could really see themselves clearly. "Old Du, I heard that someone in these forces said bad things about me?" Chu Xiu suddenly asked. Du Guangzhong nodded and said, "Yes, someone said that they slandered you and did not have good intentions this time. They wanted to contact the martial world forces in the Jianghu prefecture to boycott you. The one who said it was the sect master of the Divine Feathers sect, Soaring Feather Falcon, Chen Gongtai, and the hall master of the Black Cliff Hall, Horizontal Refined Golden Body Do Weihu. My informant found out from the Luo clan's subordinates. It's definitely true." Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said to Du Guangzhong, "Go tell Qin Fang and Lu Qingli to gather their trusted subordinates. Remember, as long as they are elite trusted subordinates, the weakest must be an innate." Turning his head, Chu Xiu said to Ghost Hand King, "The same for your people. Gather all of them and be ready to wait for orders." After joining the Guangzhong torture room, Ghost Hand King and the others did not have a specific scope of authority. They could only follow by Chu Xiu's side and wait for orders. Moreover, the person in charge of them was also Ghost Hand King. Yan Bugui was not good at managing these things, while Tangya found it troublesome and did not care about these small powers. Therefore, these things were still managed by Ghost Hand King. Anyway, he was not weak. Most importantly, he was the most prestigious among the assassins from the Blue Dragon Society. He was just the right person to handle this kind of thing. Du Guangzhong thought of something, and his expression changed slightly, while Ghost Hand King naturally nodded in agreement. He had done this kind of thing many times in the Blue Dragon Society. Ghost Hand King was already used to it. In fact, if they were strong enough, Ghost Hand King would have killed all of them. In his opinion, they were just a bunch of shameless people. After these martial arts forces left, Chu Xiu's elite subordinates gathered. There were close to 100 martial artists above the innate realm. This number could not be compared to any martial arts force in the Jianghu prefecture. "Let's do it. Take a stroll around the Divine Feathers sect and let some people know that it is necessary to control their mouths." After Chu Xiu gave the order, his subordinates immediately started moving. They secretly concealed their tracks and headed towards the mountain gate where the Divine Feathers sect was located. When Chu Xiu made his move, Chen Gongtai, the sect master of the Divine Feathers sect, had already returned to the sect. He had never been interested in Chu Xiu's overbearing way of doing things. This time, when he heard Chu Xiu say that he wanted 20% of their profits, he was the first to stand up and refute. Moreover, there was one thing that he did not say about Chu Xiu's conditions. He could see through Chu Xiu's ambition from Chu Xiu. He had sent people to the sects to supervise their accounts and control their financial lifelines. It would be fine if it was only for a short period of time. However, if it was too long, Chu Xiu would really become the emperor of all the sects in the Jianghu prefecture. This was something that Chen Gongtai absolutely could not tolerate. He did not know if others had seen through Chu Xiu's wild ambition, but he had seen through it. Chen Gongtai was also prepared to tell the other sects about Chu Xiu's wild ambition and let all the martial arts forces in the Jianghu prefecture unite to resist Chu Xiu. At the same time, they could also cooperate with him. Although Chu Xiu had revealed his wild ambition this time, the idea he proposed was really good. In the past, the martial arts forces in the Jianghu prefecture not only fought on their own, but also had friction with each other. If they really united as Chu Xiu suggested, each monopolizing a business, lowering the purchase price and raising the selling price, the income of the sects would definitely increase beyond their imagination. Without Chu Xiu, their business could still continue. Why did they have to make an emperor of their own? With this thought, Chen Gongtai revealed a proud smile on his face. He immediately prepared to let his disciples inform the other sects to come to the Divine Feathers sect for a discussion. However, at this moment, a disciple hurriedly pushed the door open and said in panic, "Master. Bad news. The people from the Jianghu Prefecture's Inspector Hall have surrounded our mountain gate." Chapter 176. Outside the mountain gate of the Divine Feathers sect, hundreds of elite warriors under Chu Xiu surrounded the mountain gate. The Divine Feathers sect wasn't located in the city, but on a small mountain with verdant hills and limpid waters. Chu Xiu had inquired about the Divine Feathers sect from Du Guangzhong. It was one of the most common small sects in the underworld. In the beginning, the founder of the Divine Feathers sect was just a rogue warrior. He found a place to live in seclusion because he was tired of fighting in the underworld. However, he wasn't willing to leave his knowledge behind, so he taught some disciples. After these disciples learned their skills and wandered the world, they carried forward their knowledge and taught it to more people. As a result, a sect was gradually formed. Compared to the aristocratic families, there were obviously more small sects like this. However, such small sects weren't as closely related to each other as the aristocratic families. Therefore, the possibility of them being destroyed was higher than the aristocratic families. At this moment, in front of the mountain gate of the Divine Feathers sect, Chu Xiu's face was expressionless. This was just a stepping stone for him. What else could he feel? After a while, the mountain gate of the Divine Feathers sect was opened. Chen Gongtai walked out with a group of Divine Feathers sect disciples with a gloomy expression. He shouted, "Chu Xiu. What do you mean by this? Just because I didn't agree to your conditions at the banquet, you're forcing me to agree now? Aren't you a little too overbearing? Are there any rules in the Guangzhong torture room? Or do you think that the martial arts forces of the Jianghu Prefecture are pushovers?" Chu Xiu looked up at Chen Gongtai and smiled. However, he didn't give Chen Gongtai any explanation. He just spat out a word coldly, "Kill." Chen Gongtai was the chicken that would be killed no matter what he said or did. Since that was the case, why would Chu Xiu waste so much time talking to him? He could just kill him directly. As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, the martialists of the patrol hall swarmed forward and charged at the Divine Feathers sect disciples, who were still in a daze. At this time, Chen Gongtai was so angry that he wanted to curse. This Chu Xiu was going to take things to the extreme. He didn't even give him a chance to speak. Obviously, the other party had already made up his mind to kill them. However, Chen Gongtai couldn't understand what Chu Xiu was thinking. By annihilating his Divine Feathers sect, Chu Xiu would be enraged by the entire Jian province's martial arts community. Although the Jianghu Prefecture's martial arts forces all had their own agendas and could be said to be in a state of disunity, that was because they had yet to truly encounter a crisis. Chu Xiu killing people at this time was very sensitive. A force like the Luo family would definitely not choose to stand idly by. Before the knife was placed on the neck, the martial arts forces of Jianghu Prefecture would not make a move. They were all watching. However, with the annihilation of his Divine Feathers sect, it meant that the knife wasn't just placed on their necks. It had already begun to bleed. Therefore, no matter how Chen Gongtai thought about it, he couldn't figure out why Chu Xiu would make a move at this time. This was simply the action of a lunatic. Chu Xiu didn't make a move to annihilate the Divine Feathers sect. He only said to Tangya, "Tangya, you deal with this person." Tangya's lips curled into a lazy smile. Two small daggers with dragon engravings appeared in his hands as he slowly walked out. His weapon seemed to be constantly changing. Even Chu Xiu didn't know what weapon he was proficient in. The Divine Feathers sect's Chen Gongtai wasn't too strong. At least, that was what Chu Xiu thought. If he went all out, Chen Gongtai wouldn't be able to withstand more than a few moves. This time, Chu Xiu didn't ask Tangya to make a move because he was too lazy to do it. Instead, he wanted to give Tangya and the others a boost. He wanted to let Du Guangzhong and the others see the true strength of Tangya and the others, and see if they could stand on equal footing with them. This wasn't because Chu Xiu was deliberately biased towards Tangya and the others. This was just a process that newcomers had to go through when joining an organization. For example, when Chu Xiu had first joined the Blue Dragon Society, he had destroyed the Yu family and completed a level 5 mission alone. Only then did he gain the recognition of the other assassins of the Blue Dragon Society. Now, this was why Chu Xiu asked Tangya to make a move. He wasn't as narrow-minded as the guilty branch leader. He didn't have many subordinates in the first place, so it was meaningless to let them waste their energy on this kind of internal strife. It was better to let them quickly see the strength of the other party, so that he could have a baseline and didn't have to test the waters. At this time, when Chen Gongtai saw that the person who made a move wasn't even Chu Xiu himself, he couldn't help but feel his blood boil. This time, Chu Xiu had personally led his men to destroy the Yu family. But in the end, Chu Xiu didn't make a move. Instead, he let one of his subordinates, a constable that he hadn't even seen before, fight him. What was the meaning of this? Was he saying that he didn't have the qualifications to fight him? Facing the murderous intent of exterminating his entire clan, and still being humiliated like this, Chen Gongtai's eyes turned red with anger. His figure flashed, and with a flash of white light, he leaped into the air, like a rainbow piercing through the sun. A small, slender sword appeared in his hand, and he slashed towards Tangya with a chilling aura. The Divine Feather sect's special skill was their movement technique, the Flying Feather 12 forms. This movement technique allowed the user to display extreme speed, especially in close combat. Some people didn't even see his figure before they were struck by his sword several times. His nickname was Fluttering Feather Falcon, which was a description of his agility and the lightning-fast momentum of an eagle. In the face of Chen Gongtai's sword, Tangya still had that slightly mocking smile on his face. His body suddenly moved when the sword was about to reach him. Like a swimming dragon, he easily slid behind Chen Gongtai. A sharp aura erupted from the two dragon-patterned daggers. Like a flurry of blades, he crazily slashed at Chen Gongtai. Chen Gongtai jumped in fright at this moment. He was a person who excelled in speed. He didn't expect to see someone faster than him today. Chen Gongtai flipped the sword in his hand and whistled down like an eagle soaring through the sky. Violent astral energy erupted, meeting Tangya's daggers. But he was shocked to find that the opponent's strength was actually greater than his, and he was forced to retreat. Both of them were experts in movement techniques, and their attacks were also extremely fast. So when they started fighting, Du Guangzhong and the others couldn't even see their movements clearly. The only thing they knew was that Tangya was currently suppressing Chen Gongtai. For an assassin of Tangya's level, he had killed more than 1 or 2 targets of Chen Gongtai's strength. He didn't feel the slightest pressure at all. Chen Gongtai was fast, but Tangya was even faster. His agility was like a swimming dragon, and his sneak attacks were like a ghost. He directly forced Chen Gongtai to the extreme. After a dozen moves, Chen Gongtai's body was already bleeding. Chen Gongtai gritted his teeth. He was still puzzled. When did the Jianghu Prefecture's Inspector Hall have such a troublesome person? This speed was simply terrifying and strange to the extreme. Chen Gongtai roared angrily, and astral energy erupted from his body, temporarily forcing Tangya to retreat. At this time, the thin sword in his hand strangely broke into 7 pieces. It looked like a sword thrust, but in fact, it was like 7 flying daggers attached with incomparably sharp astral energy. They went straight for the vital acupoints of Tangya's body. This move could be said to be Chen Gongtai's trump card. It wasn't a legacy technique of his Divine Feathers sect, but a hidden weapon technique that he had accidentally obtained from a secret box in the past. It was called the Seven Swords Soul Chasing. The body of the sword must be specially forged. At a critical moment, as long as a specific astral energy was used, the sword could be broken into 7 flying daggers and slashed at the opponent. This move was very useful in a sudden attack. After all, no one would have thought that a sword that was supposed to stab forward would turn into a hidden weapon halfway through. Chen Gongtai rarely used this move, but every time he used it, it meant that he was ready to kill. Looking at the 7 dagger-like broken sword stabbing towards him, Tang Ye's mouth could not help but reveal a mocking smile. The 2 dragon-patterned daggers in his hands disappeared, but as his hands danced, everyone could see wisps of golden light bursting out from his hands. No one present could see what the golden light was. Only Chu Xiu saw it clearly. It was the dragon tail soul-chasing dart that Tang Ye had been playing with. And it was 24 dragon tail soul-chasing dart. 24 dragon tail soul-chasing dart in an instant. As Tang Ye's hands danced, the 24 dragon tail soul-chasing dart directly turned into a large net with the support of astral energy, enveloping Chen Gongtai. In the blink of an eye, the 7 broken swords were blown away. No matter how fast Chen Gongtai's movement technique was, he couldn't escape from such a dense net of daggers. In an instant, everyone could only see a flower of blood blossoming in the net of daggers. There wasn't even a scream. The 24 dragon tail soul-chasing dart neatly formed a circle on the ground, and in the middle of the circle was a pile of minced meat that looked like it had been thrown into a meat grinder. Such a terrifying and bloody scene made the constables who came from the Guanzhong torture room turn pale. As constables, what they had seen the most was corpses, all kinds of corpses. But the scene before them could no longer be called corpses. It was simply a scene of dismembered corpses. Even Du Guangzhong and the others couldn't accept this scene. Looking at the pile of minced meat, Tang Ye spat out 2 words indifferently: trash. No one knew whether Tang Ye was referring to Chen Gongtai's strength as trash or the opponent's hidden weapon technique, which could only be achieved through sneak attacks, as trash. With a wave of his hand, astral energy swept out and the dragon tail soul-chasing dart on the ground were put into Tang Ye's sleeve. No one knew if he had a secret space box or if there was something else hidden in his wide sleeve. He walked back slowly. This time, the constables looked at Tang Ye differently. There was even a hint of fear in their eyes as they involuntarily moved away. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.